The scene begins with a traffic accident, where bystanders rush to the scene, calling an ambulance because someone is trapped inside the vehicle. The person in the car felt like they were about to die, alone with no family or friends. There's nothing valuable left to keep, and no special memories to cherish. His life was filled with loneliness, and he wondered what life would be like after death. The scene shifts to an elven family in another world. This is where Lisa, the main character, tells his father that he will go into the woods alone to find food. His mother anxiously asked if that was wise, reminding him that the forest was full of dangers. She expressed her concern, saying that Lisa was only 10 years old and should wait until she was at least 30 before going out there. However, Lisa insisted that they had no need to worry. At this time of year, the muscular wolves wouldn't be a threat. His mother was still hesitant to let him go alone. Lisa said that life, foraging for food and napping in the forest, was simple and easy for him. Lisa's father remarked that he was growing faster than other children. Lisa's mother gently stroked his face, expressing concern about him maturing too quickly, especially considering that the elven lifespan could extend to 1,000 years. Lisa pondered this, recalling how he should have died in a horrific accident. Instead, he was reborn as a member of the elven race, who typically live for 1,000 years. Now, he enjoys life as Lisa. Although he didn't know why it happened, he believed it was a second chance granted by the gods, and he was determined to live life to the fullest without regrets in this world for the past 10 years. Lisa embraced her new life, beginning to build a foundation for a brighter future. However, due to the elven people's long lifespans, the concept of time became vague and fluid. Furthermore, the village surrounding the ancient Aedral tree was protected by a massive invisible shield, rendering threats from natural disasters and the dangers of magical beasts virtually non-existent. The Aedral's fruit flourished, becoming the main food source for the villagers. The elven people thrived in this environment, born to live in harmony with the surrounding nature. Most elven people spent thousands of years of their lives in this village without ever venturing outside. As Lisa was about to speak, the village chief, a frail old man leaning on a cane, approached and remarked that Klein's son was as energetic as ever. He noted that Lisa had only learned to speak 5 years ago, yet now he was already curious about the outside world. Lisa's mother apologized to the village chief, but he reassured her that it was all right. He noticed that some elven people had expressed interest in the outside world, but he warned that it was a dangerous route. Having served as village chief for over 600 years, he had witnessed many elven people venturing out and meeting tragic ends, particularly those connected to humans who often faced sorrowful fates. This makes the outside world dangerous. The village chief asked Lisa if he still wanted to explore the outside world, and remarked that Lisa was more intelligent than the others. Lisa expressed his gratitude to his parents for raising him, and thanked all the people in the forest for taking care of him. He spoke of his desire to leave a mark, to show that he had lived in this world. He thought that even if he had 1,000 years to live, he wouldn't want to live forever in a small, confined world. He wanted to learn many things and meet many different people. He reiterated that he wanted to live a life without regrets. Lisa's father replied that if Lisa was truly determined, they wouldn't stop him. The village chief gently patted Lisa on the head and said that it had been hundreds of years since the last elven had ventured out into the world. Now, the village chief is willing to let Lisa do that, provided he passes the exam. Lisa was thrilled and agreed to take on the challenge. The village chief instructed him to master the highest level of elven healing magic, which resided in his soul within a century. Lisa wondered about the meaning of 100 years. The village chief explained that this was important because the outside world was very dangerous, and Lisa needed to be able to protect himself. If Lisa passed the exam within 100 years, the village chief would allow him to explore the outside world, and he asked if Lisa understood. Lisa thought for a moment, realizing that 100 years sounded like an eternity, but in reality, it was only a tenth of an elven's lifespan. He felt that if this was the only condition for venturing out into the world, then it would be a worthwhile challenge. Lisa agreed, and the village chief warned him that this exam is not a challenge that can be passed half-heartedly, and this cannot be forgotten. 10 years have passed, and Lisa is now testing her healing magic by healing an ancient tree. The village chief was astonished to see that his great ancestor, having survived for over 1,000 years, it has now been restored. This spell represents the pinnacle of elven magic, the ultimate healing spell. The village chief couldn't believe that only 10 years had passed since Lisa began training. He asked Lisa how he managed to achieve this incredible feat. Lisa replied that he had been practicing magical powers since he was a child. The village chief, curious, asked him when he had started, and Lise said that he was now 22 years old, so he had probably started practicing when he was about 5. Lise realized that before receiving permission from the village chief to venture into the forest, he had already prepared for his future. The first part of his plan was to cultivate and enhance his overall magical power. He recalled that within the ancient tree lay a vast library filled with magical books, mostly written by humans. Through those studies, he learned that a person's magical potential was typically determined around the age of 20. Lisa understood that 3 factors were crucial to success: circumstances, innate ability, and effort. The frequency with which a person can unleash their magical power is directly proportional to the increase in their magical ability. Understanding this, Lisa pushed herself to the limit, using healing spells continuously until she was nearly exhausted. However, he realized that the average lifespan of a human was only about 60 years, meaning their magical powers usually only developed until they were 20 years old. This made him wonder, what would happen if an elven practiced their techniques? He speculated that his magical powers could continue to grow until he reached the age of 300. The village chief was astonished. He had never imagined that anyone would reach the pinnacle of healing magic so quickly, especially with the exam still 80 years away. Lise then said that he had read in a magic book that elven people specialized in healing magic. Dwarves specialized in earth magic, and monsters possessed types of magic suited to their species. However, through research and practice, Lise came to believe that, theoretically, using other types of magic was also possible. In the forest library, most of the magic books focused only on healing spells, so he asked the village chief if there were any books on other types of magic elsewhere. The village chief, looking surprised, agreed and asked if Lise really intended to learn other forms of magic. Lise replied that until the exam ends in 80 years, he wants to achieve as many accomplishments as possible. The village chief remarked that although ghosts no longer exist, but the passion for learning magic was something even the elven couldn't help but inherit. He then gave Lise the key to the forest library, allowing him access to forbidden books. However, he warned that the magic books that Lisa lacked the aptitude for would require a great deal of time to understand. Even if he could comprehend them, it might take as long as 100 years. Lise received the key gratefully, promising to do his best to reach the pinnacle in all forms of magic. The village chief advised him to remain calm throughout his training. After careful reading in the library, 10 more years passed. Lise realized it was time to take the exam. By the age of 30, he had mastered all kinds of magic as promised, and wondered what magic books he would find in the library by then. At this time, the village chief also entrusted Lisa with the responsibility of maintaining and managing the library. Filled with excitement, Lisa sets out to search for magical books from the outside world, marking a significant day for him. The elven's only connection to the outside world was through the people who governed the surrounding area, particularly the Verlanda family. The former village chief and head of the family made a vow, initiating a long-lasting cultural relationship between the two peoples. Lisa searches for magical books from the outside world, transforms products from ancient trees into assets, and makes a deal with the head of the family, Grulette Garlandia. Sitting on a tree branch, Lisa recalled a young elven who had called him teacher. It was observed that none of the humans could keep up with Lisa's magical training, an undertaking completely outside of elven tradition. Then the young elven suggested that Lisa should meet up with her childhood friend. Lise paused, lost in thought as he recalled their last meeting. Just then, he saw a carriage approaching. At first, Lisa thought the person inside was Grile, but he quickly realized that the boy's appearance had changed a lot since they last met when the boy looked around. Lise hid her hand, which startled Grile slightly, surprising him. Lise approached, greeted him, and called him Grile. He said it had been a long time since they last met, and asked what kind of magic book Grile had brought with him this time. The boy was surprised to see Lisa and exclaimed that it was true. Lisa really did exist, just as his father had said. Lisa wondered which father the boy was talking about. The boy knelt before Lisa and explained that this was the first time he had met her, and that he was Gilead's son, Galeus. He went on to say that his father had told him about Lisa. Recognizing this as Galeus, son of Gilead, Lise couldn't help but think that they had only met a few days ago. Galeus explained that his father had wanted to see Lisa in person, but no one could resist the passage of time, and Gilead was no exception. As he began to feel the weight of the years, Galeus, the eldest son, decided to visit, hoping his presence would be accepted. Lise then asked Galeus when he had last been to the forest. Galeus replied that his parents had gotten married about 2 years ago. That means almost 22 years have passed since Galeus last visited the forest. Lisa reflected on how only 22 years had gone by since he became an elven. He had completely lost track of time. But he realized how quickly people's lives change. When Lisa mentioned leaving the forest soon, Galeus was surprised to learn that Lisa only had 7 years left before leaving. Lisa nodded, realizing that by human standards he was 93 years old. He added that if he ever left the forest, he would definitely visit Galeus's family, and he asked Galeus to tell Gilead that Lisa was very much looking forward to meeting him. Galeus was overjoyed. He took Lisa's hand and agreed, assuring her that his father would also be delighted to hear the news. After saying goodbye, Galeus left, leaving Lisa alone, lost in thought about the future. Lise told himself that if he could just pass the Elder's test, he would surely have a chance to see Grille again. Back in the library, Lisa took out a pile of books and spread them out on the floor. He thought that during the rest of his years in the forest, he wouldn't feel bored. Lise chose a book and began reading stories about heroes who were not suited to magic. These stories reminded him of fairy tales. The story of a hero who defeated a demon king sparks his imagination and inspires him on his journey ahead. Lisa continues to ponder the world beyond the forest, realizing that the demonic monsters have long since disappeared, and even the existence of the elven might be doubted by humans. Lise discovered an ancient book, seemingly a long-forgotten book of magic. The book was in a very fragile condition, its pages yellowed with age. Intrigued, Lisa began reading about the various types of teleportation magic, believing that he could at least grasp some basic concepts. Having mastered all kinds of magic, Lisa was eager to explore the ancient magical world. He recalled that long ago, humanity had become extinct, but once possessed terrifying magical powers, while demonic monsters had previously used their mystical abilities to control the world. These ancient spells are incredibly diverse and different from the 4 basic types of magic, often requiring special conditions to summon. Many spells can take months or even years to fully understand, but the prospect of unlocking this knowledge excited Lisa greatly. Determined, Lisa picked up the book and decided to try a spell, planning to practice near his home. He began chanting the Vizandali teleportation spell, feeling a strange surge of energy flow through him as he completed the incantation. Lisa wondered if he had actually pronounced the spell correctly the first time. In the blink of an eye, Lisa found herself transported to a dense forest. The air around her was heavy, and the moment he opened his eyes, he immediately heard the growling of a creature nearby. The smell of blood filled the air, sharpening his senses and sending shivers down his spine. Lisa realized he had wandered into a realm far more dangerous than he had imagined. When Lisa regained his balance, he found himself standing before a group of gigantic creatures, their menacing forms surrounding him. Behind him, Lisa noticed several men, their faces filled with confusion and fear. He overheard them whispering to each other, wondering where he came from and whether he was a member of the group. He felt a wave of confusion wash over him. He had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. It seemed that, although he had successfully used teleportation magic, he had somehow left the protective barrier surrounding his forest. Lisa's mind raced as he assessed the situation. Then, his gaze settled on a child lying near the monster's feet. The little girl was injured, but surprisingly, she was still alive. Lisa felt a growing sense of anxiety, and instinctively he moved closer to the child, determined to help her escape the imminent danger. He recalled that after leaving the forest, he had learned and used a new movement technique. He should have appeared near home, but it seems he's arrived in a completely unfamiliar place. Based on his current situation, he realizes he's outside Adrasel's protective circle, and behind him were people he had never met before. They were asking him who he was and whether the organization had sent him. Lee saw a pack of monsters in front of him, and a child had been attacked by them. One man explained that they were being pursued not only by monsters, but also by thugs from the gang and their goods. He lamented their terrible luck. Suddenly, a wolf let out a growl, and the group realized it was targeting them. In a panic, they started running away. Lise realized that although they intended to use him as bait, he was determined not to let that happen. Leaving the injured child behind, he refused to let their plan succeed. Lise immediately cast a dark magic spell, Black Whip, to imprison all of them, rendering them unable to move. These people looked at each other in bewilderment, not understanding what strange thing had wrapped around them, rendering them unable to move. Lise turned to look at the injured child, thinking he could help her. But at that moment, he saw the pack of wolves charging towards him. He immediately activated the hardening spell, enhancing his magic, and he used Beast Fist to hit a wolf. The injured child watched Lise fight, Meanwhile, Lise realized this was the first time he had used the Beastman's enhancement spell, and he was surprised at how effective it was for his muscles. He quickly took down the next wolf. One man noticed Lisa's ears and asked the owner if they belonged to an elf. The owner, surprised, asked why a creature that only existed in legends could be here. A third person added, saying there were rumors that elves could only use healing magic. Lise looked at the child again and realized that she seemed to be the only one still clinging to life. If she's still alive, you can treat her. Lisa approached the girl, reassuring her that everything would be all right, and she would recover soon. Lise activated her dragon's healing breath skill, infusing the little girl with a surge of healing power. A man saw this and wondered if Lisa was setting the little girl on fire. The owner denied it, explaining that the girl was absorbing the flames. Eventually, she recovered, and the other man exclaimed in surprise that a wound that could only be healed by great healing magic had now been healed in the blink of an eye. When the little girl tried to say something, she pointed to the necklace around her neck, and Lisa understood immediately. He realized it was a binding magic, preventing the little girl from speaking. She nodded in confirmation. Lise touched the necklace and explained that if anyone other than her owner tried to remove it, it would automatically self-destruct. He realized that these magical tools had been made for slaves, and finally understood the current situation. Lise reassured the little girl that she had done very well by enduring everything so bravely. He told her to trust him. Lise decided to remove the magic from the necklace, but to do so, he needed to infuse it with a much stronger amount of magical power than before, and also use a destructive spell. He chanted the spell, Devil's Thread, and when he took off the necklace, he threw it aside just before it exploded. He told her that she had done very well to endure everything. Seeing that, the leader of the group sighed and realized that Lisa had definitely broken a magical seal. Another man asked if Lisa was really an elf. Lisa approached them, wondering what to do now that they had discovered his identity. The boss explained that they had been tasked with protecting the children, but their luck ran out when they encountered a pack of muscular wolves. They tried to fight back, but the monsters tore them apart and devoured them one by one. Without Lisa's help, they would all surely have been killed and eaten. They were filled with gratitude and begged Lise to deliver them. Lise wondered if they really wanted to help, and he realized they might already understand his situation. But with her extensive experience, Lisa knew they were plotting to steal everything. When they heard Lisa knew about their plan, they were very surprised. Lisa informed them that he would ask them 3 questions. First, he wanted to know who they were. Second, he asked why they had changed. Finally, he asked them what their motive was for kidnapping the young children while they were traveling through a dangerous forest. Lise warned them that if they answered truthfully, he would spare their lives. The group became frightened and promised to answer truthfully. Finally, they confessed that they were merely hired slave traders, and that there were parents willing to sell their children when they needed money. Regarding the second question, they explained that they were being pursued because someone in the group had betrayed them. Regarding the third question, they revealed that while en route to deliver goods for a transaction, they were pursued and had no choice but to escape through the forest. Lise pondered this, realizing that in this world the nature of humanity was not much different from what he had witnessed before. Lise recalled the warning from the tribal chief, who had emphasized that she should never get involved with humans, because they are brutal, cunning, and vicious creatures. The tribal chief advised Lise never to forget those words. However, Lisa stopped reminiscing and returned to the present, where the group's leader pleaded that since they had answered all the questions correctly, Lisa should let them go. Lisa noted that the tribal chief had repeatedly advised him to stay away from humans, suggesting they would forget what had happened, perhaps even forget to meet Lisa. But just as they were about to act, the leader, surprised, asked him what he was saying. Lisa immediately cast a memory-altering spell, the memory burial spell. The group suddenly became confused, and Lisa decided to leave them there, even though they had no memory of anything. The little girl tugged at Lisa's sleeve, calling him her benefactor, and asked if he was an elven. Lisa nodded, introducing himself as Lisa. He felt relieved that she could speak again, and he apologized for not being able to help the other children. When he looked at the girl's chest, Lisa discovered a cross-shaped scar, the mark of a magical tool, proving that she was a slave. The little girl said that if she were stronger, she could certainly help other children, at least to protect them. But now she feels helpless, she can't do anything. Seeing the immense power of the magic Lisa used, the little girl longed to become as powerful as her. The little girl begged Lisa to let her follow him so she could learn and become stronger. Lisa sensed a hint of awkwardness in the girl's words. If she truly wanted to be strong, he realized that deep down, She possessed an unwavering determination. Despite being warned against getting involved with humans, he couldn't bring himself to abandon the little girl. He interfered in her life, and now he feels a heavy responsibility to bring the little girl back safely. He reminded himself that now, he is no longer human, although it will take another 7 years before it can be brought out into the world. It was a period of time that meant nothing to him, but for the little girl, it would feel like an eternity. He couldn't bear the thought of her having to wait all that time. With unwavering resolve, Lisa was forced to make a choice. He couldn't allow the girl to accompany him, for the difference in their perception of time was too great. Lisa raised his hand and cast a spell, causing the girl to faint. As she fell into a coma, he felt a heavy weight in his heart, but knew it was the only thing he could do at this moment. Just as she lost consciousness, Lisa heard footsteps approaching. They were the people searching for the slave traders, determined to prevent their escape. Time was running out. He needed to leave immediately. Lisa decided to hand everything over to the slave traders. He jumped onto a branch, telling himself that in 7 years, if the girl's resolve remains unchanged, they will surely meet again. Later, he returned to the library where he heard rumors about an extraordinary girl who called herself the Nameless One. She is said to possess extraordinary strength and has achieved remarkable military feats. Finally, 100 years passed since Lisa became an elf, and a strange girl came to visit the chieftain's house. She apologized for being summoned, but she just said it was all right. The chieftain reiterated that Lisa had always been there, and he recalled the promise he had made to Lisa, to train him until he turned 100. But it seemed Lisa's heart remained unmoved. Elves are born to live peaceful lives in the village, under the protection of the Yggdrasil tree. The chief then asked the girl what she thought would happen if an elf like Lisa went out into the world. Like a baby mouse jumping into a battlefield. The girl replied that the result would become clear when they saw the fire. Lise looked outside, thinking to himself that this day had finally arrived. He had trained for 100 years for this moment. And now, the final day of the exam, before he can leave the ancient forest, has arrived. The tribal chief met with Lisa to inform her that the final exam had concluded. After a century of training, Lisa's desire to leave the ancient forest remains unchanged. Lisa nodded in agreement. Just then, they heard a voice calling the chieftain, remarking that it seemed they had a child full of energy about to leave. Even though someone was speaking, Lisa couldn't see who it was. The chief explained that the other man had never lost to him, nor was he inferior to Lisa, which made him uneasy. The mysterious voice continued to speak, suggesting that Lisa must be a genius to be allowed to leave this place after only a century of training. The chieftain admitted that Lisa's talent was difficult to describe in words. Perhaps with what she had accomplished, Lisa herself would gradually realize her true limits. Unexpectedly, a girl appeared before him, graceful yet mysterious. She was like a harbinger of impending challenges. Dazed, Lise wondered where she had come from. She identified herself as Rahab Lori, a being nearly 6 centuries old. He immediately recognized her as the mythical figure who had appeared among mortals to heal the dying in exchange for rare fruits. This meeting made Lisa extremely excited. He clearly remembered that she was the one who had collected hundreds of books from the outside world centuries ago. Her name was mentioned countless times in them. Compared to me, she's like a knowledgeable senior. But contrary to expectations, Rahab turned out to be a muscular goblin with extensive combat experience. She said the test was very simple. Lisa just needed to survive until she ran out of magic from the attack. Using healing spells wouldn't matter. Having honed her skills for 3 centuries, she only asked that he not be too rough. Lise thought to himself, if he just passed the test, he would be free. He eagerly awaited that moment. But before he could prepare, a matrix appeared beneath his feet, and from there, boulders shot up, as if wanting to crush everything in the first moment of the battle. Lise dodged, stunned to realize his opponent had unleashed such powerful magic without chanting a spell. Earth magic, Earth Strike, has just been cast. This caused his magical foundation to tremble, as if it were being heavily suppressed. He gradually realized she was beginning to read his every move. Another blow came. The pressure escalated. Lise wanted to react, but deep down he felt a sense of injustice. Rahab attacked relentlessly, her staff emitting a continuous glow, a sign that another spell was about to be cast. She made no secret of her contempt. Humankind was inherently cruel, cunning, and weak. Amidst the magical rain, Lisa realized the outside world has no place for those who only know how to receive. To survive, he had to learn how to fight. Without hesitation, he cast Varlane's earth magic, erecting a barrier to defend against the attack. A magic spell on par with Rahab's earth-shattering spear. She was intrigued, surprised by his abilities. As an elf, she had always thought Lisa only knew how to heal. But now he's like a different person. Bold, reckless, and full of potential. Lise himself understood that. His motivation stemmed from memories of a past life, when he was human. Gathering momentum, he used the wind body spell, propelling himself into the air. Rahab realized this was grand magic, a form of advanced spell. In that moment, she wondered if she could shoot him down from that height. The answer came immediately afterward. Blazing fireballs detached from the staff, tearing through the air as they hurtled towards him. Mid-air, Lise realized that although her power hadn't reached its ultimate level, her ability to cast spells without focusing made her incredibly dangerous. He reminded himself he mustn't allow himself to be distracted, not even for a second. Rahab admitted to being impressed by Lisa's skills, but she also warned that her offensive tactics wouldn't stop. Soon he would have nowhere to escape. While Lisa was still avoiding the question, she unexpectedly threw out a question that made him freeze. Why did he want to leave this world? Unexpectedly, Lisa still answered amidst the battle. He believed that the lives of the elves were long, but could easily pass by in silence without purpose. Rahab replied that the elf village was more peaceful than anywhere else. To her, it was paradise. Lise pondered. A century had passed since he was reborn as an elf. So many failures, so many restarts, all for a single goal, to reach the pinnacle of magic. But more fundamentally, it's a desire to leave a mark on this world. He recalled his past life, a dull existence, without purpose, without any true connections. In the end, only regret remained. Now, in this new life, he wants to live differently. He wants to understand more, to experience more than anyone else, and to be remembered by someone. For that dream to come true, leaving the forest is inevitable. Lise paused in her train of thought, realizing she had just confessed everything to Rahab. She fell silent, lost in thought, and this time it was Lisa's turn to ask, what about her? For what reason did she leave that peaceful place? Rahab pulled out a glistening fruit, cradling it like a treasure. Lisa watched intently, and before she could react, she revealed the real reason she longed to leave the forest, simply because she wanted to enjoy many delicious fruits. Lise was stunned. It turned out that all these years she had only been luring people in exchange for fruit. She admitted that she had loved that flavor for a long time. In the forest, she could easily harvest the chrysanthemum berries, but after 50 years of eating the same thing, her palate had grown tired of it. From then on, her desire to explore other fruits emerged, prompting her to venture out into the world. Lise couldn't believe it. He asked if it was worth 300 years of arduous training. Rahab simply nodded, gently replying that she had tried her best, and 3 centuries passed. He actually thought that was a good thing. At least she was prepared. But what about the others, their comrades who had left without undergoing training? She gazed into the distance. They had been swept away by the raging waves of the outside world. No one would return. It was through such rigorous training that she was able to protect herself, travel through many lands, and learn dark magic from humankind. A power that helped her survive and taste the flavors of countless exotic fruits. Rahab took a bite of the fruit in her hand, a hint of nostalgia crossing her face. There was a time when the outside world captivated her, but lately she'd noticed those flavors had faded. They weren't as rich as before. Lisa suddenly thought about food. Besides fruit, what other flavors awaited her in the world? Meanwhile, hidden deep within the forest canopy, the chieftain silently observed everything that was happening. His eyes never left the 2 men, a test with a deeper meaning than a battle. Rahab returned to the game, reminding them they had been talking for too long. Now for the final part, where she will give it her all. Blazing fireballs and a barrage of spells rained down. Lisa quickly used wind magic, summoning a wind spirit, Sylph, to escape the storm. But the more he fought, the more he realized. Now he could only rely on Clantis's magic. Meanwhile, Rahab could control multiple elements at once if she truly wanted to. Lisa couldn't defend forever, so she counterattacked. He used the enhancement technique and hardening magic to create a beastly punch. An attack imbued with primal power shattered the object Rahab had just used. A magical spear? She picked up a piece of broken glass, examined it, and then admitted he had destroyed it. Lise was surprised. What is that? Rahab replied, a magic stone, a type of stone crafted by humans that absorbs magical elements. With just a little energy infused into it, it will automatically cast spells. Lisa was stunned. It turns out that all the magic she's been using so far wasn't her own. He couldn't help but wonder, could she really use so many different spells without chanting? Rahab calmly admitted. Even now, she could only truly use healing spells. The rest is just trickery. According to her, if a child doesn't even know how to deceive people, they won't survive out there. Rahab had thought she could crush all naive illusions. However, all of her cunning attacks were completely dodged by Lisa. The battle was over and she acknowledged his triumph. The challenge was complete. Lisa was overflowing with joy. Finally, a century of relentless training had brought him to the finish line. He bowed his head in gratitude. Rahab smiled, gently acknowledging. He had fought with everything he had. If Lisa had been born earlier, she said, perhaps someone would have considered him a menace. A devastating demon lord among men? Lisa chuckled softly. All those long years, every drop of sweat poured down, culminated in this moment. He had earned his well-deserved reward. The scene shifts to a bustling marketplace in the human world. A young girl entered the fruit shop, her face beaming but maintaining a polite demeanor. The shop owner greeted her warmly as she approached. She took out some shiny coins and pointed at all the fruits displayed on the counter. The seller was stunned. He couldn't believe she was once again planning to spend her entire fortune on fruit. He asked for the reason. The girl bowed her head slightly and whispered, because she had heard that the elves loved fruit. When he tried to ask more questions, she just shook her head, indicating it was nothing important, and then urged him to complete the transaction. Unable to refuse, the seller agreed. During the exchange, she silently pondered something. Her mind wavered slightly, for how long had it been since she had waited for the moment to see him again? She was certain that the day of reunion was not far off. Meanwhile, Lisa's father and his group were gathering fruit when he appeared, walking towards them with the tribal chief. News of his passing the test spread quickly. His father couldn't hide his excitement, and the tribal chief claimed to have witnessed the whole thing firsthand. His mother gently suggested he take a short break at home. 10 years wasn't a long time. For the elves, time always flows slower than on the earth. But Lisa had made up his mind. He would leave tomorrow. Even so, his mother reminded him, at 100 years old, he was still just a child in their eyes. Lisa recounts the test he underwent alongside his senior Rahab, a man who understood the world and recognized his abilities. His father immediately recognized the name, Rahab Lori. To him, she was like a younger sister. He recalled the first time he set foot in the deep forest. This is where Rahab began pursuing healing magic. If even someone like Rahab acknowledged Lisa, then there was no reason for him to doubt her. Lisa remained unwavering. He was ready to leave this peaceful place and venture into the wider world. His father turned his back, took something out, and asked him to make a wish. But before Lisa could speak, his mother interrupted. That before her son left, there was one more thing that needed to be clarified. His mother said that before he departed, she still had a few things to do, things only a mother could do. Lisa was slightly surprised but obeyed and sat down. She approached, her gentle eyes filled with unspoken words. From her sleeve, she took out a small object, a silver pendant gleaming with a faint emerald hue. It was the object that had kept her hair so lustrous for so many years. That locket was more than just a keepsake. When she and Lisa's father were married, the sacred tree Idrizel bestowed it upon them as a charm, part of a divine blessing, eternally protecting the wearer. Lisa took it, and he could feel a gentle energy emanating from within. He was about to say that he was already 100 years old and didn't need to worry anymore. But before he could utter a word, his mother's arms tightened around him from behind. She whispered, hoping that if one day he ever fell, at least, he would let them go first. He nodded. The promise was made, not with words, but with the heart. Shortly after, his father called back. Before Lisa lay dozens of carefully prepared boxes. Food, supplies, herbs, enough for a decade. Lisa was stunned. For so many years, he had been quietly preparing everything, simply believing that the time would come when his son would need to leave. His mother exclaimed, worried that he wouldn't be able to carry all that treasure. But Lisa merely smiled. With a wave of his hand, he deployed space-preserving magic, an ancient technique simulating teleportation magic, interfering with the inner realm to maintain the physical state within. No decay, no rot, no degradation. The magic astonished both his parents. His mother laughed heartily, joking that she wished she had one like that too. The chieftain stood silently behind them, thinking to himself, that skill was not just magic, It was a sign of someone who had touched upon an ancient mystery. The next day, Lise was ready to leave. With a wave of his hand, he walked away, officially departing. His mother watched them go, her heart filled with longing. She sighed, saying that from now on she would feel empty, but also believed that one day they would be together again. Lise continued walking, a feeling of unease rising in his heart. He wondered if Rahab was still there, but then thought she might have already left. His destination now is the Garland house. He recalled the only human family that had ever communicated with Elvin Kond, the Garland family, and the promise made 7 years earlier to Galeus. Although he hasn't been able to meet them yet due to his prolonged illness, he now longs to see Gilead again. As he approached the protective boundary of Yggdrasil, sensing the surrounding magic, he stepped through and officially entered the outside world. The weather today is beautiful. The sky is clear and blue, perfect for a trip. Suddenly, a roar echoed from behind. Lisa turned around and saw a group of wild beasts approaching, but just as they were about to attack, a girl appeared, using fire magic to summon a legion of flames. With a single swing of her arm, the entire pack of wolves was annihilated. Lise was surprised by her speed and efficiency. She turned to look at him, then stepped closer. A fleeting feeling of fear crossed his mind, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. She sat down, smiling gently. "I have waited for you for 7 years," she said, her voice warm and low. Lise noticed a cross-shaped wound on the girl's cheek. And then he suddenly realized she was the woman he had saved 7 years ago. She nodded, confirming his recognition, but said that her memory of the moment was rather vague, leaving only a faint glimmer of hope fueled by his words at the time. It was that very hope that motivated her to persevere in her training, waiting for this moment. He admitted that he had never imagined she would keep her word so well. She smiled, agreeing with him. Lisa recalled that day when he used healing magic to save her from the brink of death. She vowed to become stronger. Lisa remembered using magic to seal those memories deep within her heart. But even so, she remembered his words, exceeding all his expectations. Then the girl pulled up a box and said that since he had remembered her, she hoped to give it to him if he would accept it. Lise was surprised by the size of the box and asked if there would be any problem if he opened it to see what was inside. She nodded in agreement, and when he opened the box, he was surprised to find it full of fruit. She explained that she had heard that all spirits love fruit. From tropical cactus fruits from the west to icy fruits from the Arctic, she traveled far and wide, collecting all kinds of fruits from around the world to give to him. She invited him to eat as much as he wanted, without a worry. Lisa was surprised by her thoughtfulness. He wondered if the elves' love of fruit had truly spread to humanity. He began to think that perhaps it was an influence from Rahab. He asked her curiously how long it had taken her to collect all these fruits. The girl replied that she had used all the money she earned from her bounty hunting. Lise was astonished by the answer, exclaiming that the amount she mentioned was truly enormous. She insisted that even so, it wasn't enough. Lisa disagreed, saying it was actually far too much. He wondered if she was all right. It seemed they both carried their own anxieties, as neither knew much about the outside world. He thanked her for her kindness, but then she asked him if he had any plans to go anywhere and insisted on going with him. Lisa hesitated, replying that it was possible. She explained that she had experience as an explorer, could guide him, and assist in negotiations with people. Lise realized she was right. He had only recently left the village and knew little about the outside world. Moreover, as a spirit, rarely venturing outside his territory, he felt reassured having someone like her accompany him. He then asked her if she had any problem joining them. She confidently replied that she had done everything she could over the past 7 years to prepare for today, so there was nothing to worry about. Lise felt confused and asked her again if that was really the whole reason. She smiled, nodded, and then went on to say that the reason she did all of this was to become stronger. The girl longed to learn from Lisa's strength for the rest of her life. Lise found her resolve admirable, but he couldn't help but wonder about her words. For your entire life. He thought, given her age, it was probably only about 40 more years. He was surprised to think she was planning to be with him for 40 years, even though that seemed a bit far-fetched. Although feeling a little overwhelmed, Lisa was still happy to be seen in that way. But after all, 40 years is still just 40 years. Then Lise told her that he wanted to go to the Garland house. She replied that it was located in the Garland swamps. Then she started looking through the map. Lisa thanked her for her help. Meanwhile, he also activated his magic skill to retrieve a fruit. He thought it would be great to enjoy one right now. When he took a bite, he was surprised to feel a pleasant, tingling sensation from the fruit. Minori called his name, confirming that she understood his excitement. Lise felt a surge of happiness and urged her to set off. She smiled and agreed. The two approached a man, and Minori spoke up, wanting to trade a horned rabbit and 3 slimes. She asked what the best price he could offer was. Meanwhile, she heard people around her talking about her, calling her the strange woman. She immediately shouted, asserting that her name was Minori. Both felt a little confused. Lisa was wearing a long coat to cover her ears, and he couldn't help but think that Minori seemed quite popular in this place. Minori said that it seemed they would have enough to reach the border of Margaret Garland. A man asked if they were really going to Gallius, the lord of this region. He took over from the previous lord. Since then, the economy here has flourished, mainly due to the increased demand for hunting magical monsters, which eventually provided adventurers with enough to fill their dinner tables. Lise reflected on how 7 years had passed since he last met Gallius. The scenery shifts to 3 years after he left the land of the spirits. As he and Minori were walking, she pointed ahead and asked if he could see that if they continued down this road, they would be able to see Fort Kuchuk, part of the Margaret Garland border, just a little further on. Lise thought that for someone like him, who knew nothing about the outside world, Minori's presence was truly a blessing. Minori explained that they had left the forest and Fort Kuchuk should be near the border. Lord Garland kept many magical monsters in these border forests, helping to protect the Empire from the haunted woods. As Lisa walked away, he saw the 2 men dozing off while sitting. Lise noticed that the closer they got to the fortress, the more bodies of those who had fallen appeared. Minori said that she had recently heard about an invasion of magical monsters. Lise thought about Gallius, the lord known for his good reputation, but who seemed unable to handle the rise of these magical monsters. Lisa took a bite of the fruit and asked Minori if he was the only one who noticed, but the apple tasted a little strange. He offered her a piece. When Minori took a bite of the fruit that Lise had eaten, she asked if it was really okay to eat something that he had touched with his lips. He reassured her that there was nothing to worry about, and she ate it. She commented that she didn't feel anything different. In fact, she found it even tastier. After finishing her meal, Lisa thought for a moment, then said that the taste of the fruit seemed to have diminished somewhat lately. Then he said he wanted to do some testing and use the Grancestus observation spell on the apple. He discovered that this apple is composed mainly of 80% water, 12% sugar, and 1% each of the other components, along with a little bit of miasma. The presence of the miasma startled him. When Minori asked him how the apple was, Lisa calmly replied that there was nothing wrong with it. It was just delicious, and encouraged her to eat more. Minori was touched by his gentle words. Lise couldn't believe he had found one of those phenomena previously controlled only by monstrous creatures, and it even seemed to bear a name similar to one of their special particles. Miasma. However, could there really be such monstrous creatures in this world anymore? They arrived at Kukur Fortress, where Lise met a guard. When the soldier heard that Lisa wanted to see Lord Gallius, he was surprised. The soldier explained that Gallius was a nobleman, vying for the highest position in the empire, and there was no way they could meet him. Lise confidently replied that she was a friend of Gallius, and had only asked the guard to pass on a message. The guard, who had served there for 5 years, proudly claimed to remember the faces of everyone who passed by, but failed to recognize Lisa. Minori was angry, pointing out that if the guards insulted Lisa, they were insulting her as well. Just then, Gallius appeared. He noticed the commotion and quickly recognized Lisa. The encounter stunned the guard. Gallius could not believe his eyes when he saw Lisa, as 7 years had passed since their last meeting. Gallius was delighted and thanked Lisa for remembering his promise. Lisa explained that he had come to meet both Gallius and Gilead. Gallius recounts a previous conversation with Gilead. He said that Lise had to pass a test to leave the forest. When Lise came out, Gallius encouraged him to visit their village, which was known only to the elves. Lise agreed, then seriously said that he had a favor to ask Gilead. He asked Gilead to guarantee that he would not die before leaving the forest. Gilead agreed and told Lisa to leave the forest as quickly as possible. Lise promised to do so. Gallius understood the promise his father had made to Lisa. Minori curiously asked Lisa if he was also a friend of the previous feudal lord. Lise replied that Gallius was somewhat different from Gilead. Minori wondered if that were true, to which Gallius explained that he wasn't good at fighting. While his father earned the nickname God of War, thanks to his superior fighting abilities. Minori went on to ask about the relationship between Lisa and Grillat, to which Lisa replied that Grillat was the first person to speak to him and was his friend. Gallius added that his father had spoken much about Lisa, and that when Lisa emerged from the forest, they would brew a local beer together, and he promised to make the world a better place. Lee said he was happy to hear that, but wondered what would happen if he forgot that promise. Gallius laughed and said that if that were the case, his father would become a bad person. He reassured Lisa that his father had not forgotten his promise. He's just in a coma right now. Then they entered a room, and when Lisa saw Grillat lying there, Lisa asked if it was Grillat. Gallius explained that his father had been like this for the past 5 years, and the doctors had given up hope. Gallius was certain that his father would be delighted to know that Lisa had come to visit. Lisa greeted Grillat, saying it had been a long time since they last met. Gallius added that his father was a mighty warrior who had protected them from pirate attacks and monstrous beasts for 20 years. 5 years ago, someone found Grillat severely wounded on the battlefield, and since then he has fallen into a coma and has been steadily weakening. Gallius had to shoulder the role of feudal lord, but he had to use his power to protect the land his father had fought to defend, all alone. Despite being seriously injured, Gallius never understood the extent of his father's greatness until he was gone. Lisa recalled that before coming here, he had heard of Gallius's good reputation, but he had no idea about Grillat's serious health condition. Lisa was certain that Gallius had kept this information secret to avoid causing panic. He wondered if Grillat would fight the ghostly beast alone. And when he noticed the bruises on Grillat's hands, he decided to pull the blanket away. Minori asked Lisa what she was doing. Lisa turned to Gallius and asked if he knew anything about the bruises. Gallius explained that his father was considered the most powerful white magician in the region, but even he didn't understand those bruises. Upon seeing them, he tried using the most powerful magic he could perform, but it had no effect. Lisa then used the observation spell on Grillat, and he discovered that Grillat's body contained 91% miasma. Lisa realized that the bruises were manifestations of miasma, a substance that exists in extremely high concentrations in Grillat's body. He understood that a white mage couldn't fight against miasma of such high concentration, and Grillat's body was reacting to it. Lisa asked Gallius if he had tried the most advanced treatment. Gallius agreed. Lisa said they would have to go even further and use the ultimate cure. He was certain that Gallius hadn't tried that magic. Gallius smiled and assured Lisa that he had done everything he could, but none had worked. Lisa insisted that he could not sit idly by for the past 100 years without doing anything. He had come to see his friend and couldn't leave without saying a word. Gallius understood exactly what Lisa was saying. Lisa asked him to listen carefully and explained that even if Grillat woke up, he might only live for another 2 years. Lisa then asked if Gallius wanted him to resurrect Grillat. Gallius replied that his father had always fought alone for them, and he had never had the chance to show his gratitude. His father had left everything to Gallius, and he said that if Lisa could revive Grillat, there were many things he wanted to say to them. Lisa agreed and prepared to use her ultimate healing spell. He recalled the legend about how humans could unleash it. A process that, in theory, would take decades to succeed is known as the pinnacle of healing magic. With determination, Lisa performed the ultimate healing spell, Rebarrel. After a while, Grillat opened his eyes and, upon seeing Lisa, called him teacher. Lisa asked Grillat how he was feeling and reminded him that he had come as promised. Gallius was moved to see his father awaken and embraced him tightly. Lisa thought to herself that on that day, her 100 years of hardship had finally paid off. Although he could only give Grillat 2 more years, he succeeded in giving his friend a new lease on life. Grillat couldn't believe his eyes when he woke up and saw Lisa beside him. He realized Gallius had grown up a great deal. Lisa admitted that this must have been very difficult for Grillat, and he confirmed that Lisa had kept her promise. Lisa replied that he had done so, but there was one more thing he wanted to ask Grillat. Then Lisa asked about what had happened that day. Grillat recounted that he was almost certain Fort Kuker had been attacked by some kind of magical monster. But beyond that, he couldn't remember anything. It felt as if his mind had gone blank. Lisa suggested that the obscurity might be a trick from the other side, possibly involving memory-altering magic. Grillat thought for a moment, and then asked Lisa if he believed in the existence of ghosts, which surprised Lisa greatly. Lisa explained that Grillat had a high concentration of miasma around his body, a substance that could only be produced by ghosts. Grillat asked if Lisa was implying that this was the work of the supernatural, and what they should do now. Lisa replied that first they needed to clear away the ambiguity, and he asked Grillat if he would allow him to explore his memories. Grillat gently requested it, and Lys then used magic to alter memories. He delved into the past and quickly found himself witnessing a conversation between two creatures. One of them mocked a simple human, saying that they had thwarted their invasion attempt, but it seemed this time they were out of luck and lacked the courage. The second creature asked them what they should do next. One of the creatures ordered the other to go and cause trouble with a person who had light. They emphasized that as long as they continued to attack Fort Quebec without destroying it, they would be able to approach from the other side. This creature noted that as soon as they found someone possessing the element of courage, they could eliminate them before that person could resurrect the demon lord. It was crucial to eliminate all elements of resistance. Lys turned to Grillat, admitting that he had just witnessed some disturbing things. Grillat urged Lisa not to speak out, because if he revealed that the monsters from fairy tales were returning, the world would descend into chaos. Lisa reassured him that he had a plan. Since they know the monsters' goals, finding someone with the courage will be simple. Before the monsters can act, they need to find someone who possesses the courage. Grillat asked if this was really true. He could hardly believe that the monsters had returned. Lys explained that there was no clearer evidence than the spell the monster used being altered just before Grillat fainted. The topic they were discussing at the time was the element of courage. Grillat wondered if they believed that element existed, then the fairy tale might be true. Lys clarified that Grillat was referring to well-known fairy tales, legends of the hero that all of humankind knows. Grillat agreed, suggesting that this was certainly the story they were thinking of. Lys recalled having read a little about this in the Elven Village library, and he realized that courage had been mentioned in battle records as a force beyond this world. Grillat wondered if those monsters were searching within humanity for someone who possessed the element of courage. Lys agreed, asserting that finding people who possess courage is extremely important, because the other side had no idea that Grillat had discovered them. Grillat revealed that through their conversations, the person possessing the element of courage is undoubtedly a human being, and is currently present at Fort Cougar. 20 years have passed since he inherited this territory from his father, and it is a widely known fact that the number of magical beast slayings here has increased significantly since he fell ill. Following his downfall, adventurers from all over the world flocked in, eager to claim the tempting rewards, which led to a wave of fierce battles with the beasts. Lys mentioned that if it were like a fairy tale, then those who possess the element of courage are certainly among these people. As he stood up, Grillat called after him, but Lisa simply replied that he would be heading to the front lines. Grillat wondered why he had to travel so far. Lys replied that she didn't need to shoulder everything alone anymore, and he is finally living in the outside world. With 900 years ahead, what could be more depressing than watching the world fall into the hands of monsters? A week later, the scene shifts to the dining room of the Grillat mansion, where a lavish meal has been prepared. Minori felt a gnawing hunger in her stomach, and a woman in the room offered them food to eat as much as they liked. Lys couldn't help but praise the dish, saying it was absolutely wonderful. Grillat then introduced Lisa to his wife, Silpha. Lys asked if she was the childhood friend Grillat had mentioned. Grillat confirmed, stating that he had promised to introduce them to each other. Silpha, surprised, asked if he had really made that promise to an elven, and Grillat replied that the promise had been made when he was king, before they were married. Silpha bowed her head in gratitude to Lisa for everything he had done for her husband. No matter how many times she says thank you, it will never be enough to express her gratitude. She even became emotional as she spoke. Lisa simply smiled and replied that it was what he had to do. Grillat complimented his wife, saying she was lovely. And Lisa recalled Grillat's words about proposing to his childhood friend the next time he met her, and promising to introduce her to Lisa. Lys paused, thinking about something that saddened him: the short lifespan of human beings. Grillat was astonished, remarking that it was a strange way to compliment his wife. Lisa suggested they accept Silpha's invitation and call Minori in. Minori asked if she could eat, and Lisa agreed. As she tasted the food, she couldn't help but praise how delicious it was. Silpha sensed Minori's unhappiness and gently explained that it was a sincere expression of gratitude for her cooking, which made her happy and eager to cook more. Lisa admitted that they had been surviving on magical creatures they encountered along the way, along with seeds and fruits. While Minori was eating, Silpha remarked that it reminded her of Gilead's younger days. Gilead happily asserted that Silpha's cooking was the best in the world, and always had been. Silpha humbly replied that it was an overly sweet compliment. Then Gilead curiously asked Lys and Minori how they had met. At that moment, Minori suddenly stood up and declared that she was Lisa's wife. This came as a complete surprise to both Gilead and Lisa. Gilead exclaimed in astonishment, So Lisa already has a wife? Lisa quickly denied it, but when she turned to look at Minori, she simply smiled and reassured her that they would be together forever. Lisa explained that Minori had expressed a desire to become stronger, and in response he agreed to teach her about humanity and allow her to accompany him on his journey. Sensing the sadness in Minori's eyes, Silpha approached and gently asked if she would like to try cooking with her. Minori shyly admitted that she was only good at fighting and had never cooked before. Silpha reassured her that it was okay, and she didn't need to worry too much. Anyway, there's an old saying that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Hearing this, Minori smiled and said that Lisa would be very happy to hear this, so she would definitely try her best. The two of them then went into the kitchen together. Gilead called Lisa and said that he had heard that it was very difficult for humans and elves to have children together, something the village chief had told him a long time ago. Lisa asked why Gilead was bringing this up now. Gilead then asked Lisa what she intended to do about it. Lisa replied that unfortunately he didn't see any signs that Minori liked him at the moment. Gilead expressed regret about the situation. Lise told himself that Minori might have actually harbored feelings for him for a long time, despite facing many difficulties. As Lise and Minori were preparing to leave, he reassured her that they would return. Gilead replied that he trusted Lise. Gallius then intervened, reminding them that Lisa was heading towards the largest forest in Vastera, located between Fort Quuker and Riedele, where magical creatures frequently appeared. It's an extremely uncertain place, so they need to be very careful. Lisa and Minori set off toward the forest, where Lisa noticed it appeared to be a major area for adventurers hunting magical monsters on their way to Fort Quuker. Minori agreed, saying that she had been to that forest before and hunted magical monsters that had come right to the fortress gates. In this area, they can simultaneously monitor both the adventurers and the masterminds behind the magical monsters. Lise mentioned that, according to Gilead, there was an abandoned house in the forest and he was considering turning it into their base. Minori wondered if it was really possible to find someone with heroic qualities, because their only clue was a fairy tale. It's like searching for someone who can't use elemental magic, but they won't know for sure until they ask people to demonstrate their magical abilities. Lise replied that with his judgment skills, he could recognize if someone possessed heroic qualities. However, with such a large number of adventurers, they will have to evaluate each one individually. Minori expressed surprise and asked if he could actually use magic to find someone with heroic qualities. When Lisa agreed, she turned away and said that he was very impressed. Then, Lisa activated her magic to assess her condition. After a while, he asked Minori if she agreed with this approach. She asked him what he meant. Lise explained that they had discussed this before and that finding someone with heroic qualities could take a long time. This could last for years, potentially forcing them to stay in the forest for an extended period. He also noted that she might miss out on her entire human life if they stayed there too long. Minori replied that she had already made her decision. She spent 7 years pursuing an illusion, and she told him that for her, happiness was being with him and becoming stronger. She decided to follow him for the rest of her life. Minori blushed and declared that no matter how hard he tried to convince her not to stay, she wouldn't leave. Lise thought to himself that things were getting too close, and he turned away to reassure himself. Just then, Minori called out, saying she had spotted the house. Lise informed her that it would take 6 hours to walk from Fort Quuker to get there. Minori asked what the house in the middle of the forest would be like. He explained that before the area was overrun by monsters, Gilead's predecessor had used the house as a summer retreat. Upon hearing this, Minori thought that a nobleman's summer house must be very luxurious. However, upon arrival, they discovered the house had been destroyed. Lisa suggested they begin cleaning up. Minori was surprised and Lisa asked what was wrong with her. She hesitated before explaining that he had just used magic to clear everything away in the blink of an eye, and she thought this was her last chance to be useful to him. Lisa explained that this magic was very useful, and he had made a temporary contract with the spirits around them, which is called spirit magic. He deciphered this when he was only 78 years old. Lisa noticed Minori's deep sadness and asked her why she was so affected. Minori replied that she didn't feel sad, but Lisa remained resolute, believing it was time to complete the final step. He used egg thread magic, a type of barrier magic. Lisa then gathered some soil from the nearby area, causing Minori to ask him what he was doing. He told her not to rush and to wait. Suddenly the land transformed, growing back into a shield surrounding the house. Minori wondered what was happening, and Lisa explained that the house was now invisible to the outside world thanks to this shield, and neither monsters nor ghosts could find them while they were searching for those who possessed the courage factor. Minori was impressed and realized that he really could do everything on his own. She recalled his kindness and expressed her willingness to do anything for him. However, he continued to thank her. She understood that he would be perfectly fine on his own, and she realized that her desire to stay with him was a selfish wish of hers. She never knew who her parents were. As a slave, she simply existed to survive. And it was at that very moment when she was about to be killed that he arrived to save her. And for the next 7 years, no one wanted to join her team, simply because she had been a slave. She did everything she could to survive, not wanting to waste the gift life had given her. In the 7th year of their promise, she still went to their meeting place every day, waiting for him, always reminiscing about the past. She longed to tell him that her wish had come true, but she couldn't be happy about that. She didn't want him to keep her around just out of pity. She was determined to become a useful person, no longer a burden. She thought about ways to truly help him. She wanted to become strong enough to fight alongside him. She asked him if he planned to find someone with heroic qualities and defeat the evil monster together. He replied that if he could, he would, but he didn't have the necessary heroic qualities to fight the evil monsters. Perhaps they needed to practice first. However, he wasn't sure when that would happen. Minori was confident that he could defeat the demonic monster, and she suggested that he train her while they traveled together. He doubted whether she was strong enough. She replied that she also wanted to fight alongside him to defeat the evil monster. He understood her goal, and he agreed to train her right away. He pushed her to practice as hard as she could, causing both his and Minori's faces to turn bright red. The landscape had changed after 2 years, and as they ran through the forest, she called out his name. Minori announced that she had discovered 5 magical beasts at their 3 o'clock position. He used his appraisal magic, and she noticed there were 4 B-rank monsters and 1 A-rank monster. Lise realized that Minori had become very proficient in using appraisal techniques. He agreed with her assessment and asked if she could defeat the A-rank monster. Although she hesitated slightly, she confidently replied that he could trust her, then continued to move forward. Lisa quickly spotted a flock of cockatrice approaching from the direction Minori was running. He instantly killed one with wind magic, but he felt a strange sensation when these monsters completely ignored Minori, even though she exuded a strong, murderous aura. He realized they were actually running away. Then they encountered a Class A wild bear that was chasing them. Minori prepared to use her advanced fire magic, Enchant. When the bear lunged to attack her, she unleashed her ultimate fire magic, Phoenix. She pierced the bear with a flaming sword. After the attack, she took a deep breath, feeling exhilarated. Lise praised her, and she smiled happily, saying that she had succeeded in using the ultimate magic. He responded that she could now use such powerful magic with ease, and remarked that she had taken down a wild bear, proving just how strong she had become. He reached out to help her stand up and said that she needed to focus on improving her physical fitness so she could continue fighting even after using that magic. She smiled gently and agreed. Lise sensed something different about Minori and reflected on the 2 years they had spent training together in the forest. At the age of 20, Minori officially became an adult. At home, Minori prepares her secret dish, recipe number 33 Kakaktrisu Wa Okudan. After Lisa finished eating, he remarked that it was another delicious dish and praised her cooking skills. Noting how much she had improved over the past 2 years, she replied that it was all thanks to Silpha. Lise asked if she knew of anything noteworthy happening at Kukr Fortress. Minori reported that the number of magical beasts was increasing as usual, but there was no information about the courage factor or the demon lord. Lise thought about how they still hadn't encountered the monsters he'd seen in Gilead's memories, and realized that things would likely remain the same for some time. Suddenly, a girl appeared at the window making a noise. Minori stood up to check and said that it was a magical messenger from Kukr Fortress, and she would go investigate. Lise found it exciting to think about having such a magical tool, with its potential for further research. Minori returned in a hurry, calling his name. He asked what was wrong. She replied that it was about Gilead. Lisa suddenly remembered that it had been almost 2 years since he had treated Gilead. Then they prepared to use teleportation magic to get there. They arrived at Garland's villa, and when Lise called out Galeus's name, the young duke expressed his gratitude for their visit. He also didn't forget to thank Minori for coming along. Just then, Vice, a petite girl, walked in and greeted Lisa. He responded to her warmly. Galeus informed Lisa that his father was there but was no longer conscious. However, he requested to see Lisa. Vice followed in and called out Gilead's name, the little girl announcing to everyone that Lise had arrived. Lise looked at Gilead's face and noticed that he looked serene, no longer as tired as before. Gallius observed that Gilead was not the same as she had been 2 years earlier. At that time, Gallius had finally been able to talk to and resolve his misunderstandings with his father. He explained that in the past, he had been unable to fulfill the responsibilities of a lord, but now his father was teaching him everything he knew. More importantly, he always had Vice by his side. At this point, Gallius's eyes welled up with tears, and he expressed that it was all thanks to Lisa. Lise reflected that, for him, the past 2 years had been just a moment. But for others, time flies by quickly. He wondered if Gilead was satisfied with what she had gone through. When Lisa checked Gilead's pulse, he found it was still weak, life slowly slipping away from him. Lisa recalled that Gilead was his first friend in this world, and he wondered when his hands had become so small. He hesitated, wondering if it was selfish of him to wish for a little more time with his old friend. Sophron encouraged Lisa to proceed, assuring him that they would grant all his requests. Lise expressed a wish to see Gilead one last time, a revelation that astonished Gallius. He asked Lisa how she could possibly make that happen. Lisa explained that this would be possible through death magic, an ancient form of magic called necrosome, which controls the cycle of life and death, once used by a legendary resurrection mage. Lisa asked Gallius what he would say to Gilead if he could meet him again. Gallius honestly replied that he would thank his father. Suddenly, Lisa was transported to a strange place, where he saw a portal through which countless souls were passing. Lisa realized that it definitely led to the afterlife. Just then, Gilead appeared and asked if Lisa was really there. When he turned to face him, Gilead said that this wasn't the right time for Lisa to be there. Lisa reassured Gilead, saying not to worry because he had prepared for this moment. Then Lisa explained that he knew a spell that could temporarily bring souls into existence. An ancient necromancy technique called necrosis. This technique was used by a famous resurrection mage to summon the first demon lord, and the dragon came to him. Although it's only temporary and this method has limitations, Lise promises that one day he will find a way to truly revive Gilead. Until that time comes, he advised Gilead to wait for him. Gilead said that Lisa is truly capable of doing anything. Then he turned to leave, saying he had lived long enough. Gilead thanked Lisa for coming to see him off one last time. When Lise began to speak, Gilead went on to say that it was thanks to Lise that he was able to defend Fort Kuker. Gilead felt at peace knowing that he would spend his final days in comfort, surrounded by his family and enjoying the presence of his adorable grandchild. That's why he had no regrets. Lise asked if that was true. Gilead replied that he still had one regret: his lingering attachment to the fight against ghostly creatures and monsters. He explained that if the Demon King were reborn and launched a massacre, humanity could be trampled in an instant. He begged Lise to promise that she would find a hero and defeat the Demon King. Because Lise was the only person he could trust to entrust the future of humanity to, Lise promised to do so, and as they held hands, Gilead reassured her that as long as Gallius was by her side, Lise had nothing to worry about. Lise felt Gilead's gentle handhold, and he remembered the times the old man had held his hand. To this day, Gilead's hands haven't changed. They were still soft and pristine white. Lise recalled the chieftain's words that elves didn't actually begin to age until they reached 800 years old. This surprised Gilead, and he asked if the chieftain had lived that long. Lise bowed his head, and Gilead remarked that for Lise, life must have been nothing more than a fleeting moment. Afterward, Gilead thanked Lisa for crying for him. While Lisa wept, he recalled Gallius's words, "Thank you, and they can rest in peace." Gilead agreed, and as he headed towards the gate, he said he would wait for Lisa on the other side, finding some good sack to share with him. However, he also warned Lisa not to arrive too early. The following morning, Gilead passed away at the age of 58. He protected Fort Kuker from countless magical monsters and gods of war, who guarded the place for a mere 20 years. Under the watchful eyes of his family, he passed away in his sleep, an ideal death that everyone would wish for. Meanwhile, Lisa sat on the porch reflecting on how quickly the past 2 years had gone by. Minori was hiding and watching him, recalling the feeling of Gilead's cold, wrinkled hands when he took hers. She also recalled what he had said about Lisa's hands, that they were so white and smooth. Just then, Minori called out Lisa's name loudly, and when he returned, she had regained her composure and encouraged him to go inside and rest. Lisa noticed how pale, smooth, and warm her hands were, but he knew that one day they would change too. She looked at his face and asked if he was all right. Lisa replied that it was nothing, and he was fine. At that moment, he thought about his first friend in this world who had passed away. Then he called Minori, vowing that he would definitely defeat the Demon King. No matter how many centuries it takes, no matter if it has to be done without a hero, and no matter if the Demon King is reborn. Even though it takes centuries to persistently pursue its goal, that is the enduring strength of Grilliot. Minori reiterated Lisa's words that he didn't need a heroic element to defeat the Demon King. She agreed and said she would follow him wherever he went. They continued down the stairs and left the villa. Lise reflected on his friend Gilliat's legacy, on the place he had defended his entire life, and realized that he could inherit it, making it a part of himself. The scene shifts to 1 year later, at the house in the woods where Lisa and Minori are living. That evening, Minori announced that she had prepared her special dish for dinner. Dish number 48, steamed Ferris in white wine. When Lisa tasted it, he remarked that her cooking skills had improved significantly recently. Minori replied that she had been experimenting with all sorts of ingredients to enhance the flavor. Lisa asked if she would be okay with not naming dishes after Silpha anymore. Minori explained that Silpha had told her that they should support the people they wanted to support. Lise thought that even though a year had passed since Gilliat's death, Silpha continued to guide them from the afterlife. Minori added that when she meets Silpha in the next life, she wants to show her all the dishes she has created, and will fill Minori's special menu with all sorts of dishes. Lise smiled and agreed. He was looking forward to that day. That night, as they lay in bed, Minori fell asleep. Lise woke up thinking about how tired Minori looked. She will turn 22 at the end of this year, and he remembers how he felt when he first met her. She was still like a child. He felt anxious about how quickly humanity was changing, and he didn't want to accept that reality with Minori. Suddenly he heard a noise and wondered if anyone was fighting. Lise sensed various chaotic mana signatures in the forest. He recalled his discerning skills, and as the air currents from the trees spread, he realized something important. Just then, Minori also woke up and asked what had happened. Lise approached her, saying that he had found the person who possessed the heroic element. The scene jumps to half a day earlier, where a young boy is struggling with the weight of the luggage his team is carrying. Another boy asked if they really had to take care of someone as weak as him. It suggested that if he was unable to carry the luggage, they should abandon him at the first opportunity. The boy was so exhausted that his legs trembled under the weight. The second boy declared that this was precisely why those who couldn't use magic were useless. He warned the boy that if he dropped anything, he would have to pay the full price. Even the girl on the team didn't approve of this action, but she chose not to speak up. Everyone continued walking, and the boy carrying the luggage told himself that this was part of the training. As they continued moving forward, the boy named Ryuk, the team leader, ordered them to stop. The captain advised everyone to stop. He explained that continuing through the forest at night was too dangerous, especially since strange nests had started appearing in the woods recently, along with reports of powerful creatures. He suggested everyone set up camp in a safe place and continue their journey the next morning. Ryuk objected, saying they didn't have time for such nonsense. One of the twin sisters expressed a desire to finish the task quickly and go home. The younger twin sister complained about their noise. Meanwhile, a girl worried about the boy carrying the luggage agreed that Ryuk was right. And the boy agreed, suggesting they take the route that would be least dangerous with the monsters. They are a strong team with a B rating. While Kirosh, being merely a baggage carrier, unable to use magic, he felt out of place. However, he still encouraged everyone to keep going. The boy thought they could do what they could. But soon it became clear they were terrified and trying to flee from the monsters. In her fear, Ryoko wondered what those creatures were. They are clearly not just ordinary monsters. One girl commented that it was a sea-level magic-eating snake, and there was also a sea-level magic-eating pig, or at least that's what they were supposed to be. Ryuk used advanced water magic, unleashing a powerful stream of water at the monster, but it was swallowed without causing any effect. The girl explained that they couldn't inflict damage as only A-class monsters could absorb magic. Solara began talking about her magic, while Lulu also mentioned that her magical attacks were ineffective. Ryuk wondered how a strong B-rank team could be overwhelmed by a C-rank monster. A girl suggested they run away. As they ran, one of them remarked that the monsters were still close behind. Ryuk commented that the dark aura emanating from them was unsettling. He wondered what it was. A girl explained that it was a collection of magical energy, and possibly the powerful entity mentioned in Jin's intelligence report. She added that they should have listened to Jin's warning. Ryuk yelled at her to be quiet, reminding her that she herself had ignored those warnings and shouldn't start complaining now. Solara points out that if they don't keep moving, the monsters will catch up to them, while Lulu laments that they will die. Jin suggested that if they continued straight along their current path, they would certainly be in danger, and proposed that if they turned back to the fortress, that path would be safer. Rahab insisted that they were not ready to return. They had worked for years to transport goods and were determined to lessen the burden, as well as purchase new equipment. One girl complained that it was really too much. Ryuk replied that if she wanted, she could take her share and stay later. He decided to leave Jin there. Jin begged him to listen. He pointed out that nearby there was a path used by smaller monsters to hide from the larger ones, implying that there was still a way for them all to survive. Rahab doubted Jin's abilities, especially since he couldn't use magic. She recalled the connection from their hometown, remembering how Jin had begged him to become an adventurer. But now Ryuk felt that Jin was only dragging the whole group down. He didn't want to waste expensive magical tools on this. Therefore, he decided to rely on his skills. He used advanced water magic combined with earth magic, creating a mud pit beneath Jin's feet, causing him to sink. Jin felt the weight of the burden pulling him down and realized he was trapped. He called out to Ryuk, asking what he was doing. Ryuk ordered Solara and Lulu to retreat, while this useless fellow would become bait for the monsters. They agreed and began to leave. The other girl, who had stood still for what felt like an eternity, finally started running. Jin shouted that there was still a way for all of them to survive. But then they abandoned him. He thought about how, if he could use magic like everyone else, he might have saved them. Since he was a child, he dreamed of becoming a strong adventurer, traveling the world. He longed to defeat the monsters and protect everyone's happiness. Everything was very appealing to him. However, he lacked the most important ability for an adventurer: the ability to use magic. Typically, people begin developing magical abilities from the age of 5, peaking around the age of 20. Meanwhile, his childhood friends on the team were growing stronger while he remained stagnant. However, he refused to give up. Instead of magic, he focused on honing his swordsmanship. He was determined to become a pillar of support for his teammates. He devoted himself entirely to seeking knowledge and information, hoping to find his own path to achieving strength. But despite his efforts, he couldn't overcome the magic. Even ordinary magical tools were beyond his reach. This forced him to give up his dream, as magic was the most crucial element in this world. At that very moment, as the horde of monsters charged towards him, he felt a wave of despair wash over him. Suddenly, a girl appeared, holding a flaming sword in her hand. She quickly defeated a monster. The girl was Minori, who smiled and said she had arrived just in time. Lise followed, commenting on the dangerous situation and saying she would handle the magical pig. The pig panicked, and Lise immediately unleashed a powerful combined magic attack called Draconia Breath. Looking at Lisa's ears, Jin briefly thought he was a fairy. He wondered if that was really true. He was surprised by the boy's strength, realizing it had been a long time since he had met anyone so powerful. He said that with the right match, she didn't need to worry about the magical snake. She agreed that they could defeat it in 5 attempts using her magical powers. However, he reassured her once again, telling her not to worry about the others, that he would protect the boy. Minori added that she expressed a desire to hear someone say they would protect her. Lise then approached Jin, saying that he had been abandoned by his teammates simply because he couldn't use magic. It was as if they hadn't realized the truth about him. He reminded them that instead of being unable to use magic, he had trained his body and speed to the limit. He believed that one day his magic would blossom. He encouraged himself to keep moving forward no matter what challenges lay ahead. As Jin was about to ask Lisa something, Lise suddenly used her power, gently placing a finger on his neck and saying that the strength of patience is the essence of a hero. He then cast a high-level healing spell known as Smile of the Saint, and remarked that it was fortunate to have someone like him who possessed heroic qualities. Jin was astonished to discover that his wounds had healed without any healing medicine or treatment, and that it happened in the blink of an eye. He wondered if Lisa was a legendary male elf. Lise remarked that they really should have brought their own equipment, but he was still impressed to see Jin able to navigate the rugged forest while carrying such a heavy load along with his companions. Then he asked if he had ever done that without magic before, because most people would use magical tools to travel. Jin replied that he was born without magical powers, and he couldn't even use those tools. Lisa sensed that Jin truly lacked a magical aura, but he also noticed that Jin's arms and legs were incredibly toned, evidence of diligent training to compensate for the lack of magic. Jin became emotional, expressing his desire to become stronger. Jin wished his team would never abandon him. Lise realized that in addition to blaming his teammates for abandoning him, Jin also blamed himself for his own weakness. This self-awareness is a clear sign that he has awakened the hero within him. Lise encouraged Jin, saying that he possessed the potential to become a powerful adventurer and that she would help him become stronger. If Jin is determined to become an adventurer, nothing can stop him. But if there's still a glimmer of hope for becoming stronger, then this is just the beginning. Lisa continued to reach out and help Jin stand up. Jin suddenly recalled his past, remembering his dream of becoming an adventurer to protect people's smiles. With renewed determination, he declared that with his strength, he would strive to become a great person. Overwhelmed with emotion, he lunged towards Lisa. Lisa thought that Minori and Jin had shown extraordinary determination for their age, something completely different from his own past. He introduced himself as Lisa, and Jin followed suit. Suddenly, they both heard screams. Minori informed Lisa that a magical pig was charging towards her. Jin remarked that the animal's fur looked like a cluster of thorns. Lisa wondered if it was some kind of magic that could harden matter, and prepared to counterattack with her own magic. He also summoned a lightning magic to create the thunder punch, and he asked Jin to pay attention when the pig approached. Lise declared that this moment was the culmination of his 100 years of training. He threw a powerful punch at the magical pig. The impact stunned Jin. He thought that in fairy tales, elves could only use healing magic, and he was truly amazed by Lisa's power. Lisa suggested they should reunite with Minori, and Jin admitted that what he had just witnessed was truly unbelievable. Suddenly, a shapeless, dark figure appeared, calling Lisa Hermit Elf and asking why he was there. Lisa recognized the voice from Grill's memories and wondered if it was a magical monster. He sensed a powerful miasma emanating from that figure. Lisa turned to look at Jin, noticing that Jin was barely able to stand with only a little strength left before collapsing. Lisa greeted the entity, saying it was nice to meet it. And although his words were calm, his voice felt strangely familiar. Lisa recalled the events of 10 years ago when this entity attacked the Quaker fortress. Its body had now changed, possibly due to some kind of dark magic at work. Lisa wondered how this entity could have survived for so long as an invisible shadow, and he noticed that it seemed to have weakened considerably compared to before. The entity enters the body of a bear, refers to the cemetery in the forest, and reveals that its soul is being summoned back to that world. Trapped within this very body, it is now merely an empty shell, drawing power directly from the loyal minions of the Monster Lord. Lise thought about that venerable cemetery and recalled ancient manuscripts that described a land where a powerful entity known as the Beast God had been imprisoned. In other accounts, it was the magical pig he was facing, leading Lisa to wonder if it might have once been one of the sealed divine beasts. If that were the case, he speculated that it might be one of the Monster Lord's direct minions. They must possess enough magical power to temporarily imprison the soul of a divine beast within an ordinary monster. Lisa decided he should investigate this mystery further. He asked if this meant the resurrection of the Monster Lord was imminent. The pig replied that the resurrection was indeed imminent, estimating that it would happen in about 3 years. When the Lord of Monsters is reborn, the pig will finally be freed from the limitations of this body. Lise said that until then, unless he was swallowed whole by the magical pig first, he asked if it understood. He compared this situation to being ambushed by Grille, pointing out that his permanent form was gradually transforming into a monster, being dragged down by the material world until he became a true creature of this world, and time was running out. The bear growled at him, showing its displeasure at the attack. Lise rescued Jin and asked if he was okay. Jin agreed, pointing out that the magical monster had revealed some important information. Lisa explained that it was just a form of hallucinatory magic, and it seemed that Mouth of Truth was working as intended. Jin wondered when Lisa had used that magic on the pig. Lise thought that the pig's existence was beginning to waver. Even though it is a powerful mythical beast, it must have a weakness that can be exploited. The wild boar admitted that it couldn't predict how much longer its magic would last. For the past few years, it had never shown its true face. And now, with its life hanging in the balance, it had to obey even the most bizarre orders. It had no choice but to continue waiting. Lisa uses her appraisal skills to learn more about the wolf pig, and mentions Yuva, the commander of the Monster Lord's army operations, who has ties to Vitra. The pig was confused and asked Lisa how he knew that name. Lisa realized that the weaker the opponent, the easier it was to reveal information through magical appraisal, and that had now become very simple. Lisa suggested they make a deal. The bear, frightened, asked what his intentions were. Lisa explained that he would summon the pig's true form using his magic. In return, he wished for it to stop pursuing adventurers. As a messenger of the Monster Lord's army, The pig countered that no ordinary elf's magic could possibly accomplish that. Lise responded by demonstrating her abilities, asking if the pig thought he could live in his original form for a while. The pig was astonished and asked Lisa what kind of insane magical energy she possessed that could so easily match Yuva's power. Lise replied that it was only about 1/5 of his full power, so there was no need to worry. He thought the pig's surprised reaction showed just how easily it was drawn into his magic. The pig declared that it would not obey unreasonable commands, and the pig then asked if it could fly freely in the sky. Lise assured that he wouldn't interfere in its life, as long as it didn't cause any major problems. However, he would be very happy if he could talk to it once every 100 years. The pig agreed, promising to protect Lisa and keep its promise forever. Lisa agrees to the deal and uses her powers to transform the pig back into its true form. Jin was stunned to see it transform into a dragon of dragon lineage. Lisa remarked that initially it was a truly magnificent sight. The dragon smiled, saying this was the form it had always dreamed of. Lisa asked it how it felt. The dragon replied that it wasn't bad at all. With a fresh start, it could fly to the ends of the earth. Lisa announced that it would still take some time for its soul to fully integrate with this body. But thankfully, it had no intention of dying for another 900 years. If the dragon needed him, Lisa was always ready to provide his magical power. The dragon asked Lisa if he truly intended to live longer than dragons, who prided themselves on their centuries-long lifespans. If so, how could it ever repay Lisa's kindness? Lisa acknowledged the dragon's sincerity and said that if so, he would be happy if the dragon could gather some delicious fruit along the way. Providing magical power certainly wouldn't be too difficult for it. In fact, it was one of the things Lise had always wished for. Lise thought that after this event he would achieve something he couldn't do in his previous life. If giving up this body would help him stay in Virtue's heart, then the centuries of training he had undergone since his reincarnation would truly have been meaningful. The dragon remarked that Lisa was indeed a very special elf, and it was immensely grateful for his kindness. Then it asked Lisa's name. Lisa extended his hand for a handshake and in doing so, revealed his name. He also shared that he was an elf, yearning to escape the confines of the world and roam freely in the vastness beyond. The dragon finally declared that they were soulmates, and it gently rested its head on Lisa's hand, introduced itself as Vitra, and promised to be Lisa Klein's lifelong friend. Meanwhile, Vitra also gave Lisa something. At that moment, Lisa sensed something different and remarked that it was definitely what he wanted. Vitra invited Lisa to visit again after he had traveled around the world, then flew away like lightning. Jin commented on how quickly they disappeared. Lisa reflected on the 500-year-old mythical beast and how he had finally found a lifelong friend in this world. Just then, Minori arrived, excitedly announcing that she had defeated the snake. Lise showed her appreciation by ruffling Minori's hair and complimenting her on still possessing magical power. Her training had truly paid off. Jin pointed out that to defeat such a powerful opponent using only their own strength, they were far from reaching the level of an A-list adventurer. Lise told Jin that this wasn't the time for daydreaming. They only have 3 years left until the Demon King appears. Minori was shocked by the news. Lisa placed her hand on Jin's shoulder and told him she had something important to tell him. Within him lies a power called the Heroic Factor, a power destined to challenge the Demon King. Jin, astonished, asks if such a power truly exists within him. Lise replied that only Jin could defeat the Demon King, and he was certain that a fierce battle awaited them. Therefore, over the next year, Jin must surpass even the current Minori. Jin was stunned when he heard about that daunting challenge. One morning, Minori was training Jin outdoors and they discussed super powerful elemental fire magic, power enhancements, and illusions. Lise watched as Minori instructed Jin. She demonstrated the Black Whirl Flame technique and announced that she would be using her full power. Jin replied that it was the wrong number, except for 182, so he was ready to face any challenge. The footage jumps back 182 days to the first day of training. When Jin was asked to practice with a wooden sword, he remarked that this wooden sword was slightly different from ordinary swords. Minori told Jin that this was a special training weapon that Master Lisa had created for him. Therefore, you should approach it with caution. Jin agreed, and Lisa explained that Jin didn't currently possess his own mana, but it seemed he had the ability to store mana within his body, a process known as mana capacity. This capacity is like a mana reservoir, where mana is stored, much like water filling a container. When they use up the mana stored in this capacity, it will automatically regenerate over time, and then Jin's mana capacity will be slightly larger than before. Jin recalled reading about this in a book on magical physiology. Lisa was delighted to hear that and noted that Minori had done the same thing. Minori agreed, saying that the intense training had left her bedridden for a whole week. Jin was shocked to hear about this training method, which also worried Minori. Lisa thought that Minori wanted Jin to go through a similar experience. Jin raised his hand and asked a question. If you don't have your own mana, where does the mana come from? Lisa replied that Minori would provide mana directly to Jin, and he will transfer that mana into the wooden sword, which contains a magical device capable of storing mana in this way. Lisa explained that they could quickly increase Jin's mana capacity. He said he wanted Jin to learn how to control it at the same time, emphasizing that those born with mana must also learn how to use it, just like learning a language. This process will take many years, and it would be too long to wait for Jin's mana to develop naturally. Lisa noted that since Jin currently has no mana, his body doesn't need mana to regenerate. This eliminates the need for him to recover for a whole week, as Minori had to. This allows them to avoid that lengthy recovery period. However, Lisa also mentioned the downside. Initially, mana control would be difficult, and mana movement would be challenging. But once Jin gets used to it, he'll be able to maintain that control throughout the day. Lise can restore Jin's stamina with magic, and if they continue training for a year, Jin's mana capacity will increase 38 times, unlocking the heroic element within him. By then, when he can generate his own mana, Jin will become one of the strongest. Jin wondered if he could actually achieve that. Lisa reminded him that on the last day they had discussed the heroic element. Jin realized that only those who could defeat the Demon King possessed the heroic qualities. Lisa replied that Jin had claimed he lacked mana, but if he changed his perspective, he would realize that, in reality, he always possessed great potential within himself. Jin expressed his desire to become stronger, taking Lisa's hand and asking if that was still true. Lisa replied that his most valuable quality was his unwavering determination to never give up. Since then, 3 years have passed since their last encounter. But Lisa decided to bet on Jin. The scene then shifts back to the present as Minori attacks Jin with all her might. Jin encouraged her to do so. Lise thought to herself that this was the 182nd match between Jin and Minori, mark the exact amount of time that has elapsed since they began training. Jin focused on merging his body in the sword, allowing the sensations from the sword to flow into his body. He felt the flow of mana through his body. Just as Minori's sword clashed with his, Jin noticed it was a mana interruption. Lisa realized it had been activated. Minori insisted that there was nothing wrong and declared that she couldn't lose. With determination, she charged at Jin, vowing not to give up. Her attack landed squarely, forcing Jin to retreat. Lisa rushed over, reminding Jin that he knew he wanted to try, but recovery could only be done once a day, and trying harder would put unnecessary strain on his body. In response, Jin activated Alengen's embrace. Lise turned around, and Jin announced that the mana interruption he had just activated meant he could use magic. Lise acknowledged that he had done very well over the past 6 months. Jin, visibly moved, stood up and declared that it was time to build up his stamina and practice his swordsmanship. Lise approached Minori, gently ruffled her hair, and remarked that her ability to recover after running out of mana was very impressive. Minori replied that she wouldn't lose either. Lise thought about how calm she had been a moment before and felt that her loveliness was enough to overlook it. He then said that now that Jin had learned to control mana, they needed to move on to the next training phase to awaken his heroic element and generate mana. According to legend, awakening the heroic element requires teammates to overcome difficulties together. Lise felt a little uneasy having little Jin around, but even if they joined them, they probably wouldn't face any real challenges. Just then, Minori called out to him, urging him to look ahead, and they discovered Vitra, the dragon, approaching them. He said it had been a long time since they last met. Lisa remarked that Vitra's return so soon was a surprise, and wondered if it was too soon for the dragon to have run out of mana. Vitra agreed, explaining that the mana Lisa had provided him hadn't run out yet. The dragon even demonstrated its abilities by glowing brightly and transforming into the form of a baby dragon. This delighted Minori immensely. She exclaimed that he was so gentle. Lisa suggests that this is probably because Vitra's body was originally composed of pure mana. Minori remarked that it was a reflection of his mana, and she said she would call Jin over and prepare tea. The dragon sat on Lisa's shoulder, prompting him to ask why Vitra had returned so soon. Vitra replied that the outside world felt uncomfortable with all the monsters lurking around. Lise went on to note that with the resurrection of the Demon King just years away, the monsters and grotesque creatures were gradually increasing their miasma and beginning to gather together. The dragon asked if Lisa knew this. Lisa replied that he had seen it in the memories that Vitra had shared with him. Vitra explained that this was why he decided to stay for a while, and Lisa was surprised to learn that the dragon wanted to stay with them. Vitra decides to exterminate the monsters to regain her lost peaceful sleep, and if she stays with Lisa, they might be able to defeat the Demon King. However, Vitra insists that he is not the one destined to defeat the Demon King. It is the boy with the hero factor who is the real candidate. The dragon said that once Jin awakened that element, neither magic nor the element would be able to claim glory for themselves. Lise thought it was a wicked plan, but still assured the dragon that humans could change quickly. That night, while the dragon slept, Jin practiced his swordsmanship under the dark sky. He looked at his palm and pondered about the future. Minori approached, praising his efforts but also reminding him not to rush, as haste would dull the sword's blade. She handed him a cup of tea, and then they sat under a tree in silence. Jin wondered if someone like himself could truly become a hero. Despite receiving help, he could only utilize a small fraction of Lucy's magic, and the pressure to live up to Lucy's expectations weighed heavily on his shoulders. But at that moment, Minori interrupted his train of thought, recounting the fairy tale of the hero who defeated the Demon King. Jin recalled that he had read the story countless times since he was a child, and had always admired the heroes in it. Minori reminded us that even the hero in a fairy tale wouldn't be called a hero, unless they defeat the Demon King. Just because they are heroes doesn't mean they can defeat the monsters. It was precisely because they defeated the Demon King that they became heroes. She stood up and told Jin not to let those thoughts control him, but to focus on what he wanted to achieve. Jin asked her curiously how she managed to work so hard. Minori replied that this was what Lisa had said about defeating the Demon King. She added that he had mentioned that even if it took hundreds of years, they would still defeat him. She went on to say that even though they couldn't defeat the Demon King, Lisa would surely find another heroic element, and they would continue their new journey with new friends, overcoming all the ghostly threats. Minori also admitted that even if she stayed by Jin's side until death, she would only be a small part of Lisa's life. Minori is certain that whether in the past or the future, many people will admire Lisa. But that thought made her feel a little annoyed. She doesn't want her future tied to anyone else while she's still alive. All she wanted was to be by his side and help him. Even if it meant becoming a hero to defeat the Demon King, she asked Jin if that was okay. Jin smiled in response, saying that she was truly wonderful. The scene shifts to the 365th day of training. Minori and Jin faced each other. She used advanced fire magic, creating a sword of fire. Jin told himself that this was his chance. He activated a crowd control spell to block her attack. Minori remarked that no matter how many times he extinguished her flames, she could still use her magical powers. Jin replied that he wouldn't let her do that, and that even if he fought her, it still wouldn't be enough. He realized that simply stopping the magic wasn't enough to defeat Minori. A dragon perched on Lisa's shoulder, observing the match. The dragon commented on Jin's progress, pointing out that his control over magic and swordsmanship had improved significantly over the past 6 months. Lise pointed out that he had once said that humans adapt very quickly. The dragon replied that despite the progress, Jin's skill level was still not high enough to impress him. Lise suggested they place a bet. If the dragon is surprised by Jin's progress in this battle, Lise promises to grant the dragon one request. The dragon agreed, but also noted that the opposite would be true. It expresses bewilderment about humanity, wondering why, despite living only about 60 years, they strive so hard. Lise explained that it was their passion for their dreams that motivated them. The dragon acknowledged this, thinking that for a species with a lifespan of over 100 years, they actually think quite similarly to humans. 1000 MWK. And he realized that the dragon was glowing. When Minori attacked Jin, he recalled that this was their 365th match, and he had begun to notice some of her habits. The dragon flying nearby commented that it wasn't a bad performance. However, as it approached the battle, Lise warned that it would be too dangerous to get any closer. The dragon reassured her not to worry. Immediately afterward, Minori unleashed her powerful magic spell. The dragon remarked that this was an intense battle, and this heated fight was well worth watching. In the blink of an eye, Minori unleashed her Blaze Vortex sword technique, surprising everyone. The dragon found itself caught in the path of attack, and Jin rushed in with his sword to save it. Lise and Minori were both astonished by Jin's courageous act. Minori rushed to check on the dragon and Jin. Meanwhile, the dragon, though slightly charred, humorously remarked that it had almost been roasted alive. Minori apologized and explained that she had gotten carried away, using a powerful spell. Lise reminded her that he had warned the dragon not to jump in, so it was its fault. Jin pondered the spell to stop the magic that he had cast on his wooden staff earlier. The dragon turned to him, expressing admiration for Jin's newfound ability to use magic. Jin modestly denied it, saying it was just a new feeling. Lise explained that this was exactly what Jin had been searching for. The magic he created using his own power. Jin was still surprised by the realization that it was actually his own strength. Lise emphasized that the most important element when using magic is the ability to visualize, and he asked Jin what he was imagining right now. Jin replied that he guessed Lisa would probably call it his body moving on its own, driven by the desire to save the dragon. Lise pondered, and he concluded that this was how the shield was formed. He shared the observation that perhaps the desire to protect someone is the true source of Jin's strength. Then, Lisa asked Minori what she thought about it. She replied that her all-out attack had been completely ignored, and she felt it was a powerful magic. Lise reflected that finally, on the 365th day, Jin completed the match without collapsing even once. While the four of them were eating together at home, Lisa announced that they would move on to the next training phase the following day. He noted that Jin's magical abilities had developed significantly, and he was ready to awaken the heroic element within him. Lise explained that he wanted Jin to learn how to fight for real to help awaken the heroic element within him. Jin wondered what real combat was. Lisa thought he would find potential allies for future heroes, and he said that first they would hunt monsters in the area with Minori. Jin was excited to hear this, and he asked if there was anything wrong with him. He realized that he might have to fight alone without magic. If Lisa couldn't give him energy, Jin admitted that it might be a little selfish, but the great adventurer he aspired to be was someone who would protect everyone, and that's exactly what he felt he needed to do. Minori reminded him of the lessons she had taught him, and Jin expressed his belief that this path would make him stronger, and he'll be relying on Lise while he's there. Lise pondered how Jin still wanted to be an adventurer, even after his team betrayed him. In fact, Lisa wanted to protect the people she loved. But he also realized that it was that very desire that was Jin's strength. Lise said there was one condition. He wanted Jin to bring the dragon along. Both Jin and the dragon were surprised. The dragon wondered why it had never heard of this. Lisa replied that he had just decided to do so. He also reiterated that because he and the dragon had made a bet, the dragon ultimately lost. The dragon was shocked by this reminder. Lise went on to say that in order to avoid being sealed away again, the dragon needed to learn more about humans. The dragon understood and declared that it would witness Jin's journey. Jin felt reassured and accepted this decision. Minori asked Lisa if this was acceptable. Lise replied that the dragon would be the ultimate bodyguard, and that awakening the heroic element required allies who could wield the 4 elemental spells. Since dragons can use fire magic, they will take on one of those roles someday. That evening, Jin packed his belongings and informed Lisa that he and the dragon would be leaving. Lisa agreed. Lisa thought that he hoped Jin would become a hero, someone who protects everyone. Minori noticed Jin's expression and remarked that he looked lonely. Jin admitted that her comment was correct, saying that even though he would be leaving, but more importantly, he felt a little left behind because Jin was so dazzling. Minori comforted him, saying that Jin was the kind of person who would do anything for everyone, and she believed that he would always be there for Lisa. Lise looked at her, took her hand, and admitted that he had always been afraid. He feared the inevitable farewells because he lived on a different timeline than everyone else. But he realized that this was just an escape, and he reminded himself that Minori and Jin lived authentically, while he was merely using his lifespan as an excuse not to live in the present. Just as he hadn't done in his previous life, suddenly Lisa kissed Minori. He thanked her for everything and expressed his love for her. Lise thought about how much she wished to live with her for as long as possible. Overwhelmed with emotion, Minori hugged him tightly and said that she was so happy, and that as long as she was alive, she would always be there to support him. Lise secretly thought that he would do everything he could to ensure they could be together. One morning, while Minori was practicing outdoors, Lisa approached her and asked her to spare some time to help him with a problem. She wondered what kind of advice he needed. They sat under a tree and Lise explained that with Jin gone, and while waiting for his heroic element to awaken, he had been thinking about what they could do next. Minori remarked that they couldn't just sit around doing nothing, and she felt that living alone was actually wonderful for her. Lise then suggested that they should go to the Monster Kingdom. He took out the map that the dragon had given him, and he pointed to the great circular forest of Vestera, which lay far from their current location. Deep within that forest lies the resting place of the Monster King Letitia. Surrounding it was the land of monsters, where monsters lived. She felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of monsters in the forest, remembering that they had always been told that the monsters were extinct, which she found hard to believe. Lise explained that, in fact, they simply couldn't perceive their existence. It refers to magic that interferes with perception, similar to the veil of obstruction used by the elves. She replied that if this were true, then they were indeed very far behind in understanding. Lise admitted that, frankly, they knew almost nothing about the monsters, their biology, their numbers, or even the Monster King's target. They need to ensure Jin can defeat the Monster King, and to do that, they must thoroughly understand their enemy. She mentioned that things were different in Jin's generation. Lise then mentioned Minori and asked if she wanted to come with him. She readily agreed. Lisa pondered the 3 years ahead. If the monsters attacked, Jin and the Kakur fortress would face the front lines directly. To be with Minori forever, he had something important on his mind, and was determined to do everything he could. A week later, they were walking through the woods when they saw a bush. He wondered what it was. Minori said she didn't see anything. But when she bent down to look closer, she gasped in horror at the sight of a monstrous, half-human, half-beast creature emerging from it. Lise deduced that it must be the gateway to hell, as he used his powers to enter. Minori was astonished to witness the entire landscape around her transform. Lise remarked that it seemed like a one-way barrier. They could get out, but not get in. A black mist surrounded them, and as they both raised their hands to cover their mouths and noses, the air became heavy. Minori wondered if it was miasma. Lise confirmed that it was fairly dense miasma and suggested they continue moving forward as the monster zone began here. After a month of walking, they arrived at a deserted village. Lisa remarked that they hadn't encountered a single monster since entering the land of monsters. Minori wondered if something had happened on the monster's side. As she observed the tracks on the ground, Lisa realized the village had been devastated by monsters, but she could still sense a presence of magic nearby. He warned Minori not to let her guard down, and she noticed that they were encountering more and more monsters, and those monsters are getting stronger and stronger. Lise noted that the miasma was becoming increasingly dense, and although he was using purification magic, he asked Minori if she was feeling all right. Minori agreed and thanked him for his concern. He suggested they walk a little further. As they continued walking, they saw clothes hanging on a line. This led Minori to remark that the village appeared to have been destroyed not long before. Suddenly, they heard sounds of someone in distress coming from a dark street nearby. A man is cornered, being attacked by a pack of wolves. Minori exclaimed that a human was being attacked by monsters. However, Lisa quickly denied it, saying they were just monsters. Because they are in Monster Zone. Minori wondered if these creatures were truly monsters and not humans, when several others appeared, surrounded and terrified by the pack of wolves. Minori acted immediately, attacking one wolf and causing the entire pack to flee. These people revealed themselves, each with horns on their heads, and they were surprised to see that Minori had no horns. Minori realized that despite acting instinctively, she had been scratched by these monsters during the fight. When Lisa approached, the man explained that they were elven and human. They expressed their gratitude for the unexpected help. A woman stepped forward and introduced herself as Korda, the village chief. She said it was getting dark and invited them to her home to rest. As a token of gratitude, Lisa agreed, which surprised Minori. When they entered Korda's house, Lisa remarked that it resembled an old Japanese-style house. Minori silently wondered why Lisa so readily agreed to Korda's invitation when they were monsters and not humans. Lisa admitted he was also surprised they had been invited in, and he warned them that the place could be dangerous for them. However, he said their goal was to gather information about these monsters, and since they seemed hospitable at the moment, he suggested they observe carefully. Korda later returned with a cake and some snacks, apologizing for keeping them waiting so long. When she served the food, she hoped it would suit their taste. Lisa looked at the dish with appreciation, while Minori hesitated. She wondered if it was safe to eat when the homeowner was a monster. However, after trying a bite, Minori found the dish wonderful, with a delicate flavor that reminded her of the meals Silpha used to cook. Lise commented that the dish was excellent, just like the ones Minori usually makes. Korda watched them enjoy their meal, remarking that it felt like her son had come home. Curious, Lise asked if any of the devastated villages they had encountered had been attacked by monsters, including her son's village. Korda nodded sadly, explaining that her son had left the village 3 years ago along with many other young people. They all expressed a desire to help the Monster King and fled, leaving the village undefended. Since then, she has not known whether her son is still alive, and the village has been ruined because of it. Minori thought about the monsters and the monster attacks they had encountered. Then she quietly told Lisa that the villagers seemed like ordinary people, completely different from what she had imagined. Korda started pulling something down from a high shelf, but had difficulty reaching it. Seeing her in trouble, Minori immediately ran to help, and Korda thanked her gratefully. Minori offered to help further, but Korda firmly refused, saying she didn't want her guest to assist her. Minori suddenly thought of someone she once respected, like a mother, a queen, who had brought her moments of happiness, but now all of them were gone. Korda remarked that she would be delighted to spend time with Minori, and Minori also hoped that would happen. Korda then said that she could read Minori's facial expressions. This made Minori blush. Minori introduced herself and the two began working together. Lise saw this scene with delight and decided to go outside to meet the others. As he walked along the road, Lisa recalled what he had read in books. Monsters were generally considered the enemies of all races. However, he didn't sense any hostility from the old monsters in the village, which made him wonder if there was something different about the younger generations. If the Monster King is resurrected, will Korda's son join him? Will Lisa have to fight against him again? After a few days' stay, as they prepared to leave, Lise gave Korda the spoils from the monsters they had killed that day. Korda expressed his gratitude, and Lisa replied that they were the ones who should be thanking her for her hospitality. Minori added that although they had killed the monsters, inviting races that were previously considered enemies may still frighten them. Korda observed that despite their different backgrounds, the two seemed to share a very strong bond. Both of them blushed with embarrassment, and Korda reminded them not to underestimate the intuition of an elderly person. Although she was a monster, she grew fond of both of them. Both Minori and Lisa called her Grandma, showing their affection for her in the process. Korda said it was lovely and wished they could both live in the village forever. Lise thanked her, saying that he needed to continue his journey to learn more about the world and its monstrous creatures. The next day, when they were all together, Lisa and Minori still hadn't left. Lise uses an extremely advanced defensive spell, Valkyrie of Glitter. He informed Korda that it was an ancient barrier spell that would keep monsters out of the village as long as Lisa was alive. Korda thanked him, saying that now they could rest assured and wait for their son's return. Lise noted that her sons had rushed away upon hearing of the resurrection of the Beast King. Korda stated that their horns are bright red. This might seem strange to humans, but monsters like hybrid creatures such as goblins, they can convert harmful miasma into magical energy. Their bodies are adapted to living in miasma-filled lands, and the denser the miasma, the more magic they can absorb. Minori was surprised to learn that the monster's horns possess such power. Lise thought about what he had witnessed with his own eyes, and he realized that it is thanks to those horns that the monster can use magic. In addition to the internal magical energy they use for their work, they can also generate external magic from miasma in the air. That's why they were able to survive in the miasma-filled monster world, even after the hero defeated the Monster King. Korda recalled that when they were young, their ability to sense miasma was at its peak. At that time, their horns were redder than ever, and even their faces had changed. The other monsters were talking, one of them mentioning rumors of the Monster King's resurrection and wondering if it was true. They called their children stupid for their reckless actions. Lisa thought that the villagers probably didn't really believe in the resurrection of the Beast King. Perhaps they simply see it as a fairy tale, just like people do. This belief is probably why they treated him and Minori so well. However, the resurrection of the Beast King is not a fairy tale. Minori wondered if it was true, then the Monster King had really returned. Korda replied that all they wanted was for their children to return safely. Lisa recalled his conversation with Gilead, and reflected on how Gilead had always been determined to defeat the Monster King. However, if he did that, he would also have to kill Korda's son. Just then, Korda remembered that she had forgotten to give them something. A man then brought out an old, worn-out item, and Korda explained that it wasn't much, but an item to express gratitude for protecting their village. When she opened it, Lisa realized it was a magic book. Minori remarked that the book seemed very ancient and was written in a monstrous language. Lisa was surprised to realize that it was an invaluable historical document, with only a few copies existing in human territories. Minori closed the book and urged him to refocus, reminding him that it was time to say goodbye. Lisa asked if she could glance at the book, but she refused. She insisted that if she let him see it, he would spend all day reading it. Minori told Korda that, given Lisa's reaction, the book was the most precious thank you gift they could receive. Korda was pleased that the book would be useful to them. Lise couldn't help but wonder why Korda would give them such a valuable book. Korda replied that she believed Lisa's words because he genuinely wanted to understand their world. Moreover, they had protected this village, and she believed they needed to hold on to the belief that her children would return and persevere a little longer. Lisa reassured her that her children would surely return. Korda looked at them, sensing their kindness. Finally, they departed, continuing their journey deeper into the monster's territory. The scene jumps back 1 month to when Lisa and the others left the village of Korda. At the guild hall, a girl told Jin that she feared he couldn't handle the mission alone. Jin was surprised to hear that. Other adventurers talked about him, calling him the Crow's Nail Group's porter, and they heard he died because he couldn't use magic and didn't have time to escape. A dragon asked the girl if Jin was an official member of the group. The girl replied that, for safety reasons, the guild required at least 2 people with level E to be able to take on the mission, and she apologized, explaining that pets don't count towards the required number of family members. Furthermore, because Jin couldn't use magic, he couldn't complete many tasks. Jin and the dragon sat down, Jin's face filled with disappointment. The dragon told him it was hopeless. Jin lamented that joining other groups had been a complete failure, and it seems everyone knows he can't use magic. The dragon patted Jin on the shoulder, saying that not many fools would take on someone who didn't know how to use magic. Jin replied that the dragon didn't need to be so blunt. He thought that although he had left his teacher with determination, he couldn't let that discourage him. At that moment, a boy came and sat next to Jin and said that he had met Jin before at the guild hall. He asked if Jin couldn't use magic but still wanted to be an adventurer. The dragon wondered where this boy had come from, having appeared so suddenly. The boy explained that he had just arrived in town and was currently alone. He then suggested forming a group with Jin. He said they could handle exterminating the horned rabbits without magic, and he would take care of everything if necessary. He also said it wouldn't be a problem if Jin had a pet. The boy introduced himself as Raiden, and Jin shook his hand, introduced himself, and smiled. Raiden said they should get used to it and leave the rest to him, as the best earth mage in the village. Jin was surprised when Raiden said he had just caught a rabbit, and then Raiden asked if it was true that Jin couldn't use magic. Jin confirmed this, explaining that he had felt the inconvenience and difficulty of not having magic, and he had realized it many times. He also said that he still had a lot of practice to do, and that to reach his teacher's level, he needed to work even harder. After saying that, Jin hurriedly ran towards the forest. Raiden was surprised to see Jin and remarked that he only helped a little, but now he's teaming up with a real monster. That night, Ryuk's Crow's Nail crew was sitting in a corner, while 2 adventurers nearby were discussing the Crow's Nail crew's rise to prominence. They remarked that the crew had emerged as a shining star until a year ago, but rumors of Ryuk killing his own members caused their spirits to plummet, especially regarding the porter who didn't know how to use magic. However, a rumor circulates that the porter is still alive, and then he suddenly appeared alone at the club, now teaming up with some country bumpkin. Ryuk interrupted the conversation with a cold, sharp look and asked if that was true. Raiden is fighting a monster using magic to attack, but the monster dodged and lunged towards Jin. When Raiden asked Jin what to do next, Jin activated a signal-cutting magic spell using a jamming device and then used his sword to destroy the monster. Raiden remarked that Jin had truly accomplished that feat. Jin replied that it was all thanks to Raiden's masterful deception. Raiden reflected on the 2 weeks since they started working together. He couldn't see Jin possessing any magical powers, but he had the ability to clearly sense magical energy and magical waves. Jin's swordsmanship had not a single wasted movement, and Raiden wondered what kind of magical energy was contained within Jin's wooden sword. He called out Jin's name and acknowledged that he truly was an extraordinary person. As they approached the reception desk at the club, a tense atmosphere prevailed. The staff confirmed that their mission was accomplished, and the Hopeful Travels group was officially upgraded from D to C. They celebrated receiving the bronze badges, feeling the joy of the promotion. Raiden remarked that other teams were calling them the emerging team. However, they encountered the same old problem when reading the mission details. Jin said that Raiden was too focused on completing the missions, and forgot the requirements when accepting C-rank missions. The dragon expressed his desire to be recognized as a full member of the guild, and suggested that if he could return to his original form, everything would be resolved immediately. Raiden advised the dragon that they were in an important discussion, and suggested he go eat some meat first. The dragon happily replied that Raiden was truly amazing. At that moment, Ryuk approached and called Jin useless. Jin looked at him while the others were also surprised to see Jin still alive. Raiden asked Ryuk if he knew anyone, then suggested they could join the C-rank group. Ryuk shouted a warning, telling them not to mess around, because they are currently in Group B rank. Then he grabbed Jin by the collar, demanding an explanation for daring to show up. He said that because of Jin's failure, the whole group had been demoted to rank. Raiden looked at Ryuk with a puzzled expression at his hostility. Ryuk angrily called Jin an outsider and told him to shut up. Then he turned to Jin, insisting that Jin should have died in the forest because he didn't know how to use magic. Ryuk asked how Jin was still alive and demanded that he say something. Jin replied that he had been rescued by someone. Ryuk refused to believe Jin's words, pointing out that in such a situation facing two powerful entities, an A-rank adventurer couldn't have simply stumbled into that forest by chance. Jin replied that there wasn't just an A rank, but also an S rank, and that his teacher's power probably surpassed all human standards. Not only did his teacher save Jin from a perilous situation, but he also taught him how to fight without magic. For someone like Jin, humanity's hope in the fight against the Monster King was a powerful reason for him to be there. Ryuk dismissed Jin's story, deeming it absurd. And he questioned who would believe the words of someone who couldn't use magic. He then summoned all the hunters present, declaring that Jin had always been a burden, and he insisted that the teacher Jin was talking about was merely a product of his imagination. Jin firmly maintained that his teacher actually existed. Ryuk turned to Raiden, asking him if he believed Jin's story. Raiden admitted that it was difficult to accept the story about Jin's teacher, but he felt Jin wasn't the type to lie. Ryuk demanded proof. At the same time, a girl appeared, concealing her body under a cloak. She asked Jin if he was referring to Lisa and why he wanted to know. She explained that she knew Lisa and believed Jin wasn't lying. Jin asked her who she was. Raya grabbed the girl by the collar, saying that outsiders shouldn't interfere in this matter. At that moment, the girl's hood slipped down, revealing her elven features. A woman rushed up, calling Rahab's name and scolding her for disappearing without notice. All the hunters were astonished to realize it was Rahab, the living legend known as the Living Book of History. They were surprised to see her appear in public and didn't understand why she was there. With Rahab's confirmation, everyone began to believe Jin's story. Seeing the atmosphere change, Ryuk and his group felt uneasy. A girl grabbed Ryuk's arm, urging him to leave, but he pushed her away, yelling at her to shut up. As he was about to lay his hands on the girl, Jin intervened. Jin attacks Ryuk and demands that he stop his violent behavior. At that moment, the guildmaster appeared and declared that he would handle the situation. The twin sisters sensed that things were about to go wrong. The guild leader looked at a report about the unrest, recalling the incident involving missing guild members a year ago. He suggested a thorough reinvestigation of the incident and decided to include Ryuk's group in the investigation. Jin expressed her gratitude to Raiden and bowed to Rahab for her help. Rahab simply replied that she had intervened because she recognized a familiar name. Afterward, Rahab invited her to join them for dinner, and she happily agreed. As they sat down, a girl approached Rahab, appearing confused about the situation. Rahab introduces, "The girl is Anastasia, my current student." During dinner, Rahab learned that Jin and Raiden had teamed up to undertake new missions. Raiden commented that, looking at their current roster, no one would dare join because of the strange combination: a physical warrior, a land manipulator, and a peculiar pet. He toyed with Dragon, forcing him to eat his flesh and then pushing him away, mocking that despite Dragon's boasting of his fire-breathing abilities and his status as a legendary evil dragon, he couldn't even light a cigarette. Dragon objected, explaining that he wasn't used to his current small body, and it insisted that it once possessed enough power to destroy an entire town. Raiden scoffed, saying that perhaps Dragon said that one day it would be able to grill chicken skewers, but he was immediately refuted. He insisted that Lisa had indeed deceived him. Jin immediately spoke up, asserting that Lisa could not possibly make such a mistake. Rahab also joined the conversation, saying that Dragon was completely wrong. She sensed a strange disturbance in the magical circuits within his body. Perhaps it was due to the overly violent use of magic. Rahab went on to suggest that the disturbance might have been caused by the carelessness of those performing the procedure on the dragon. Then she asked Jin if he was Lisa's student. Jin confirmed. He said that Lisa was the teacher he respected the most. Rahab seemed more interested in Jin, saying that this made her even more intrigued. She handed them a piece of paper and asked if they would accept her into the group. She also noted that her personal rank was B, which might be a challenge for their students. Jin was extremely surprised that Lord Rahab was willing to join their group. Raiden was excited about the prospect of having a new member and thought it would be foolish to pass up the opportunity. The whole group agreed to apply. Jin reminded them that no elves are bad, and Anastasia added that if Rahab joined, she would too. So Jin, Anastasia, and Raiden went to the reception desk together to register as a group. Dragon turned to Rahab and asked about her relationship with Lisa. Before he could think of anything, Rahab replied that if Dragon kept quiet about it, she would fix the magical circuits in his body. Cleaning up after students' mistakes is also part of a teacher's responsibility. Dragon felt relieved and happy to hear this. Rahab also realized that he seemed to be enjoying this world. The scene shifts to 6 months after Lisa and the others left Korda village. Jin and Minori are hiding somewhere, observing the movements of those around them. A nearby resident wondered if there was anyone left in the village to offer to the Monster King. Another replied that the village had been ravaged by the monster. Minori remarked that it was the local dialect of Korda, and she became worried when she realized that their ominous predictions seemed to always come true.